Disclaimer: this video contains spoilers for these Destiny 2 titles. There are time codes in the description if you want to jump around. Is everyone ready? Incredible. Now, let's lock in. The year is 2018, and the video game Destiny 2 is on a course for redemption. In very similar fashion to the first game before it, Destiny 2 launched in a very rocky state. The story was better, but fundamental systems were incredibly flawed. Destiny 2 spent much of its first year, including the release of the first two smaller expansions, Curse of Osiris and Warmind, trying to pick up the pieces and restore the game to the same level of quality Destiny 1 was able to achieve by the end of its run. There were a handful of standout activities that kept players engaged, the most notable perhaps being the exotic quest to obtain the Whisper of the Worm, which provided a completely unique time-based challenge for Destiny players that proved to be a lot of fun week after week. But much like Destiny 1, it took the release of its first major expansion to finally turn the tide. Destiny 2 Forsaken managed to drastically overhaul the systems present within the game, providing a ton of new advancements and changes that players were eating up day in and day out. There were new activities, two new destinations for players to explore, the second of which, the Dreaming City, instantly became a fan favorite because of the many hidden secrets buried within. The raid experience was stellar, a genuine highlight for the hardcore player base. Beyond that, players also got to experience an all-new challenge, because on September 25th, 2018, the game introduced the Shattered Throne, the very first dungeon. Dungeons were essentially one step down from raids, so the hardcore players who love that kind of difficulty were eating incredibly well between the Shattered Throne and Last Wish all at once. And the story was a cut above what Destiny was known for, featuring a darker, more tragic turn of events, as the fan-favorite character Cade 6 was murdered at the start of the story, sending us on a quest for revenge against his killer, Aldrin Sov. So many pieces from across the Destiny story had been brought forward. So many loose threads left dangling in the last couple years were being addressed and tied in new ways. Like the suspicion that Mara Sov, Queen of the Awoken, was killed during the events of the Taken King. As players discovered after completing the Forsaken campaign, she managed to survive, and lives on the Ascendant Plane for now, trying her best to protect the universe with whatever power she has. There's a lot more to chew on here with the game, from new mechanics, pinnacle activities, a new campaign, as well as tons of deeper lore for people to dive into and enjoy. And above it all, there were major teases for the future. All of this was one major piece to the pie, another brick in the wall, and one that would launch Destiny into its next major chapter. If you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. Alright, this game isn't gonna save itself, so let's keep this moving. With the release of Forsaken in 2018, Bungie began to introduce a new storytelling model for Destiny 2 going forward. Before, all of the major story events would take place within the expansions. The campaigns and endgame material would be where you'd experience the ongoing story. But given that this was a live service game, Bungie wanted to make sure there was always something going on at any given moment. The two games so far had been fraught with content droughts and moments where not much was really going on, leaving players twiddling their thumbs or just straight up doing something else. So, heading into Destiny 2's second year, Bungie introduced the new seasonal model for stories going forward. In between each annual expansion, players could dive into additional corners of the universe every 3 months to meet new characters, continue ongoing stories, and keep exploring this universe constantly. And everything released so far for Destiny 2 had been labeled under a seasonal banner. The vanilla campaign was dubbed Season 1, Curse of Osiris was Season 2, Warmind was Season 3, and Forsaken was Season 4. And next up, just a few months after Forsaken's launch, Season 5 began on December 4th, 2018, known more specifically as Season of the Forge. This season introduces us to Ada 1, the curator of the mysterious Black Armory, an armory not even the Vanguard knew about but sat underneath the tower all this time. It's your job to help Ada rebuild and restore some things within the Black Armory, specifically the forges spread across the solar system. There was some free stuff to explore, but the season pass itself cost about $10. That was if you hadn't already bought the annual pass of Forsaken. Across the season, 3 forges are discovered, becoming the all-new seasonal activity for you to take on. You'd go to each one and face down a horde mode, waves and waves of enemies. And as a reward, you'd get all-new Black Armory weapons exclusive to the season. Even the reintroduction of the heavy machine gun, a weapon that had been part of your arsenal in Destiny 1, but had been absent from Destiny 2 until now. All of this manages to introduce a new side of the story, an interesting character with Ada 1, it increases the power level cap from 600 to 650, and it even features some surprising additions that you might not expect outside of a full expansion. There was a brand new exotic quest to obtain the last word, and there was a new raid. In a shocking move, Bungie was planning on releasing multiple raids during the year. It was truly ambitious in terms of the scale of what they wanted to accomplish. This time, players could take on Scourge of the Past, a raid that took place within the last city and had you fighting against an invading force. Now, admittedly, this was kind of on the scale of a raid layer from year 1, which were slightly smaller challenges in lieu of a more complete raid experience. Players were able to beat this fairly easily considering both that and the fact that they were a bit over-leveled compared to the enemies, which was the opposite problem compared to Forsaken's incredibly difficult and detailed raid Last Wish. But there were some real highlights here. There was a lot more freedom when it came to traversal, with even some big Sparrow sequences that players had a lot of fun with. Even the final boss, named Insurrection Prime, was pretty cool. A servitor that had been reformatted into this big, 2-legged robot thing. It's fun to take something like that down. And ultimately, the first team to complete it, led by Giggs, managed to finish it in just 1 hour and 47 minutes after it was released. It was a quick experience, one of the fastest day 1 raid clears, but its positives managed to become highlights among the raiding community playing the game. Not to mention all the cool new weapons and gear you could pick up. I mean, just good stuff all around. The seasonal model wasn't slowing down anytime soon either, as Season 6 got kicked off in March of 2019. This time called Season of the Drifter. The Drifter was of course our new major character introduced in Forsaken, the host of the game mode Gambit, and this managed to open the gates to explore a bit more of where he came from, revealing he was once known as Dredgen and how he sometimes communes with the Emissary of the Nine. Someone we've met before, both during the Trials of the Nine game mode during Destiny 2's first year, but she also briefly talked to Mara Sov during the Forsaken Endgame. This obviously helps tie into the otherworldly and hard-to-define figures of the Nine, who somehow stand above this universe in many ways. Xur is one of their agents, and they also have a horse, named Star Horse. It's crazy. All of this provides a new game mode for players to take on called Gambit Prime, which is a shorter, more intense version of Gambit that focuses more energy on cooperative play, with additional tricks to be able to sabotage your opposing team. Then we've also got the Reckoning, which takes us inside this big rock that the Drifter is carrying around behind his ship, given to him by the Nine, and allows us to explore this alternate dimension. And the season was punched up by the new springtime event called the Revelry, which was criticized in large part because it was a reskin of the Halloween Festival of the Lost event. But with certain gameplay adjustments and temporary chaos, it managed to become a well-liked event while it was around. The unfortunate reality is that because of its semi-broken and criticized state, it was only ever held once, never returning after its 3-week run ended in 2019. In fact, from all I read, Season of the Drifter overall is a bit of a low point for many players. This was not a very beloved season. Paul Tassi, who frequently writes about Destiny 2, ranked the Reckoning as his least favorite seasonal activity ever added in the game. But the power cap increased, jumping from 650 all the way to 700, giving you another 50 points to play with. And there are even hints to where Destiny is surely headed in the next couple years, as we get another hint towards the ultimate enemy that looms overhead. Ooh, I almost forgot about those. What with Cade dying in the Dreaming City and Riven and all that, I almost forgot that a fleet of pyramids are slowly making their way towards the Earth. That threat is very much still out there. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing it materialize. But weirdly enough, while the in-universe story was slowly unfolding in the game, the more interesting story actually began to unfold outside of the game. Because suddenly, Bungie was independent again. Now, technically they had become independent back in 2007 after the release of Halo 3, but after leaving the controlling arm of Microsoft, they joined forces with Activision as a publisher and primary financier on this game. But in the year after Destiny 2's launch, the long-term sales numbers for the game were quite disappointing for Activision. It wasn't meeting as high a ceiling as they were looking for. Even Forsaken, which by all accounts was a high point in terms of what it offered to the game, raising morale tremendously, didn't quite meet Activision's revenue targets. It was disappointing financially. And soon enough, everything began to fall into question. The relationship between these two grew more fractured internally by the day. Until finally, on January 10th, 2019, it was announced officially that Bungie was going to split from Activision. This was a big deal, and one of the more exciting moves in terms of Destiny 2's future, because Bungie was smart way back when to ensure that they still owned the IP. This wasn't a Halo situation where they'd have to leave the game with someone else. It just meant that Activision, one of the most controlling and oppressive forces in the gaming industry, was no longer going to be involved with Destiny 2. It was going to be all up to Bungie on their own for the foreseeable future. There was a caveat, as this meant the support systems Activision offered, like the additional studios Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios, would no longer be helping out. But it did mean that Bungie had complete freedom going forward to make the Destiny 2 they wanted. People were incredibly excited about this purely because it's really easy to find a boogeyman when it comes to something incredibly flawed like Destiny. And Activision seemed to be the perfect boogeyman. Maybe without their presence hanging over the game and without the contract that they agreed to stipulating to a specific release schedule for this franchise, Bungie would be free to do what they've been good at for a long time, making a sick-as-hell video game. This did mean the idea of releasing 4 Destiny games each every other year was no longer a factor. Despite the timeline indicating that we were approaching a Destiny 3 in 2020, Bungie instead opted to continue adding to Destiny 2. The long-term impacts of this change had yet to be seen, but it felt in some ways like the end of Return of the Jedi. The evil, overbearing force was gone. Now it's time for the scrappy underdog to prove his worth. The first hints of which finally started to come through towards the summer, as of course fans and players began to gear up in anticipation for Destiny 2's next expansion. The 4th expansion for Destiny 2 was on its way, and after months of speculation, the full reveal finally arrived on June 6th, 2019.
Looking to the future always brings us back to the past.
This reveal trailer, while only showing a crisp, pre-rendered scene, revealed a couple major pieces of information about this next expansion. For one thing, we were going to return to the moon, which had been absent in Destiny 2 after being a primary destination in Destiny 1. We were also going to reunite with Eris Morn for the first time since Destiny 1. She had been a major character in 2 of that game's expansions, but was completely unheard from in Destiny 2. Now, she's back. And finally, the title was revealed as Shadowkeep. This trailer was also joined with a 15-minute V-Doc showcasing all of the promises Bungie was offering when it came to this new expansion. Like the reveal that the location we will be visiting on the moon is the very same location we visited in Destiny 1. You know, it's the same map, the same destination, just with additional horrifying elements that have showed up since we last spent time here. But the really exciting development revealed in this V-Doc was actually the promise of what Bungie could do now that they were on their own, now that they were self-publishing the game. They were going to introduce cross-saving to Destiny 2, meaning if you were playing on PS4 and wanted to switch to Xbox One or PC, you could link your account and carry your characters over to that other platform. You could seamlessly switch, and the updates would persist across all platforms, so you could even go back if you wanted to. But the most exciting thing was the announcement of the New Light experience. They revealed that, starting with the release of Shadowkeep, when you create a new character, you will be sent back to the Cosmodrome to play the opening level of Destiny 1 again, which will introduce you to the world before letting you explore the various campaigns and activities Destiny 2 has to offer. But the real kicker is that it wasn't going to cost a thing for anybody. Destiny 2 was going to become free to play. While bigger expansions like Forsaken and Shadowkeep are still going to cost money, same with the season passes, the first 3 campaigns, Red War, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind, were now going to become free for everyone, meaning the barrier to entry for this game was now on the floor. They removed the barrier, actually. If you wanted to get into Destiny 2, this was the perfect opportunity since there was going to be so much available at no cost. 3 campaigns, Crucible, Gambit, every destination, all of it was going to be there for you to explore for no charge. This was a big step for Bungie in Destiny 2 and a monumentally exciting one. While some might be a little miffed that the campaigns they had previously purchased were now going to be free, it was perhaps the most exciting thing when it came to onboarding new players and even getting old players back. Not to mention, any remaining PlayStation exclusive activities were now going to be opened up for everyone else, and Bungie would not be releasing any new PlayStation exclusives going forward. Which means everything that's been in the game before and everything that's going to come out of the game going forward is going to exist on every system. On top of the reveal that Destiny 2 on PC was going to move platforms. Since Bungie was no longer with Activision, Destiny 2 was going to be taken off of their Battle.net launcher and instead moved to Steam. Launching the game and purchasing new expansions on PC would now happen through Steam. And for those that have been playing through the Battle.net launcher for these last 2 years, they would be able to easily migrate their characters over to Steam without losing even the tiniest bit of progress. As the reveal video states, it's so easy, even a Titan could do it.
What?
The future of Destiny 2 seemed incredibly bright as a result of these developments, and players were counting down until the fall when all of these changes would be put into effect with Shadowkeep's release.
I feel like our work isn't done. We have a series of missions that we need to finish before I think we have Destiny in the place that it needs to be, and we're back to, I guess, finish the fight, so to speak.
But of course, until Shadowkeep's launch, Season 7 of Destiny 2 launched at the start of June 2019, titled The Season of Opulence. And this was a fan-favorite season. Whenever you hear someone point out their favorite season, many times they're going to point out Season of Opulence. Emperor Callus has called upon us Guardians once again, leading us back to the Leviathan to seek treasure and gear ourselves up for the main new activity, the Menagerie. A 6-player match-made activity where you will face off against increasingly difficult enemies in these large areas within the Leviathan. On top of that, you also had access to a tribute hall, which served as both a location to display trophies that you'd won, but also a shooting gallery of sorts, a kind of training ground. All of these things managed to strike a chord with players. Menagerie and the Tribute Hall were fan-favorite additions going into this season. But on top of all of that, you now had the second seasonal raid for Year 2 called Crown of Sorrow, which once again took place within the Leviathan, sending players into the deepest pockets to take down Galron, a Cabal monster who wears the titular Crown of Sorrow. On one hand, this raid was more challenging than Scourge of the past before it, but it also brought with it one significant change that helped cement the Day 1 raid race as a real event within Destiny. This is where Bungie introduced Contest Mode. For the first 24 hours, Contest Mode was activated and mandatory for players hoping to take on the raid. What this did was essentially flatten the enemy difficulty so it was the same for every team. Before, raids were made more difficult if teams were underleveled compared to their opponents and competitors, or raids could be quite a bit easier if they were overleveled. With Contest Mode, enemies were 15 to 20 points stronger than players across the board. This made the Day 1 race a bit more fair, because now it wasn't decided by which team had the best gear compared to the others, it was decided by which team could communicate best and execute the encounters before other teams could. For the first 24 hours, and only the first 24 hours, Contest Mode leveled the playing field for the Day 1 raid race, making it a more fair competition now that a championship belt was on the line. And at the end of it all, the team Be Bold managed to complete the whole thing in just under 5 hours, beating Galron and ripping the Crown of Sorrow from his head. All of this was accompanied by the Chalice of Opulence, which players could slowly upgrade and adjust over time, allowing them to effectively choose what kind of gear they'd get from the menagerie, which was a great way to increase your Guardian's power to the new cap, which increased from 700 to 750, allowing you to get just that much stronger. All of this managed to cap off one hell of a year for Destiny 2. I mean, following on from the monumental release of Forsaken, the game never once had downtime. Fans were chewing on something every single day out of the year. Deeper lore, increased story detail, tons of great stuff for players of all kinds. Year 2 of Destiny 2 has since been regarded as potentially the best year in its entire history. But of course, the main event that Destiny 2 players were keeping their eye on was the inbound release of Shadowkeep. The wait was going to be a tiny bit longer because while it was initially set for release on September 17th, that got pushed back a couple weeks to October 1st. But now, with the date locked in, Bungie continued promotion in the last few weeks leading up to release, with further reveals regarding the moon's destination, including how the familiar locations were going to be updated and changed for Destiny 2, and how even though this is a location many players have been to before, there are new corners and new things to explore that were not available in Destiny 1. There was even a 10-minute VDoc revealing Bungie's plans and vision for what happens after Shadowkeep heading into Year 3. With the primary promise that with this new seasonal model, they're going to start telling a continuous story that connects from one season to the next in a way that builds to something bigger every year, which will then continue to build to something even bigger somewhere down the line. That would all kick off with Shadowkeep and Season 8, also known as Season of the Undying. And finally, everything was capped off with the launch trailer, putting a nice little bow on all of the promotional efforts for this expansion so far. It was an exciting time to be a Destiny player. This was going to be the dawn of a new era for the game, one that looked incredibly optimistic. All players had to do was pick up this latest expansion and get things started, which of course they could do in a couple ways. You could pick up the standard expansion for $35, which also included the season pass for Season of the Undying, or you could get the deluxe edition for $60, getting you some in-game items and emblems to help customize your appearance, and season passes for the next 4 seasons, taking you all the way through Year 3. And finally, you could shell out $90 for the Collector's Edition, which came with all of that and some physical loot, allowing you to explore corners of the Destiny universe in the palm of your hands. The clock had finally turned to October 1st, 2019. So boot up your console or even open up Steam, because it's now time to head into the shadows. Eris Morn is back. She's been sent to the moon to look into a mysterious disturbance that has risen in our absence. And in her quest for answers, she's begun to awaken nightmares hidden deep under the moon's surface. Now, with activity escalating on the moon, with Fallen and Hive beginning to return to the area in greater numbers, it's our job to deal with the problem and uncover the mystery behind these nightmares and the secrets under the surface. What all of this gives us is a rather standard Destiny expansion. Destiny 2's first 4 expansions have really followed the same trajectory as Destiny 1's expansions in a lot of ways. After 2 early expansions that had their moments but ultimately didn't move the needle, the 3rd expansion shook up the game in dramatic ways and truly revitalized the experience for new and returning players. Now, following the big game changer, the expansion to follow is significantly smaller and less impactful. It's still fun, it still has its moments, but it's not making any headlines. Shadowkeep really is the Rise of Iron of Destiny 2. But unlike Rise of Iron, which is something of a nostalgic cult following behind it, Shadowkeep is sometimes referred to as a significant low point in Destiny's history. While Curse of Osiris is more often referred to as Destiny's worst expansion, Shadowkeep is sometimes bunched right up beside it. And I think it's for one rather significant reason. Almost everything in here is reused. First off, of course, the moon is back. And it is the same location that we had back in Destiny 1. Now, there are some slight differences. There are now various cracks and breaks throughout the surface, fissures breaking through. Some of the architecture has changed, with a crashed ketch sitting in one area, certain buildings rotting away. And of course, there is one major new area on the moon featuring this grand red castle called the Scarlet Keep. This is the major new addition to the moon, and the central tower can be seen from practically everywhere on the map, which is cool. The other differences come with these phantoms that are populating the area. They appear right off the bat in the opening cutscene before slowly haunting you as the story progresses. They're even how you take on patrols on the moon, because instead of finding a blinking beacon like on every other destination, here you go up to one of these wailing phantoms and accept a brief mission from them. It's crazy. They're revealed to be the phantoms of fallen guardians from years past, and a group of them really begin to haunt Eris the longer the campaign goes. It starts where she's just got one hovering behind her, but soon enough she's got 2, then 3, then 4, and finally 5 phantoms floating around her by the end of the story. And as is eventually discovered, these phantoms are from her fire team, since 6 of them went down into the Hellmouth to kill Crota many years ago, and only Eris Morn managed to survive.
Riot! You're all insufferable! Save your torment for someone who gives a damn!
But even with these phantoms quite literally haunting the narrative, there isn't a whole hell of a lot of story to this expansion. It's very quick, spanning just 4 standard campaign missions, 1 strike, and a bit of busy work to extend playtime. But there is some big stuff, mainly as implications for the future. Because Shadowkeep, more than anything, is really one big teaser. Very early on in the campaign, we discover that the source of these nightmares, the source of the disturbance under the moon's surface, is actually being caused by a pyramid ship.
What is that? I've never seen anything like it.
A fleet of these ships are what caused the collapse so many centuries ago, the near total wipeout of humanity. And it seems one ship remained in our solar system, hidden beneath the moon's surface this entire time. Its darkness is all-consuming. Even our ghost is impacted the closer we get. The implications are, of course, immense. I mean, we've been teasing these pyramids for a while, and here's a dormant one hidden under the moon's surface. What might we discover? Well, we'll discover stuff we've seen before. Because among the phantoms and anomalies across the moon that the pyramid is bringing to life, we also see nightmare variants of certain enemies. Sometimes they're just nightmare variants of standard foes, just they have a yellow health bar and are a lot harder to kill than your average enemy. But then you get the bosses, which are simply reused bosses from previous expansions and campaigns. At the very least, we got a new way to take them down, since Shadowkeep adds the feature known as finishers. Whenever you get an enemy to low enough health, they'll start glowing gold with a circle floating above their head. This is the indicator that you can get in close, hit the right button, and do a cool move that takes them out in one hit. There is a lot of customization here, with a whole boatload of finisher animations to give you a lot of style when it comes to taking these guys down. They're of course mostly locked within the Eververse store, but it helps in moments against the tedium of fighting some of these familiar enemies we've faced before, because a lot of the busy work here sees us scour the moon for nightmare versions of many of Destiny's greatest villains. There's a nightmare of Omnigul, who was a recurring villain throughout the Dark Below expansion for Destiny 1. We got a nightmare of Skolas, who was the lead villain for the House of Wolves expansion. The nightmare of Tanyx, who featured as a main boss in the strike The Shadow Thief, also from House of Wolves. We got a nightmare of Fogoth, who was the main boss in the strike The Summoning Pit from Vanilla Destiny 1. Killing all of them awards you with a piece of Dreambane armor, which is required for activating the final level, because story-wise, this is the armor that will permit us entrance into the pyramid itself. And this is pretty cool. We get to enter the pyramid for ourselves and see its black, gothic, almost monolithic architecture. Destiny art direction has always been incredible, but this is one of those moments where it really stands out. This type of grand, hollow, and oppressive design that we haven't seen in this game before. It's really something. The power of the darkness is really impacting our ghost now too, as seemingly the voice of the darkness begins to speak through him, communicating to us about the difference between the light and dark, and how perhaps from its perspective the light isn't the all-powerful good entity we think it is.
One by one, Crota slaughtered many guardians. The light stood by and did nothing. and a great disaster ensued. In light, there is only death.
How this manifests in gameplay is, well, more enemies we've fought before. Because we get the triple threat here with the Nightmare of Gaul, repurposing the end boss fight from the Red War campaign. We fight Fickrel the Fanatic once again, repurposing his boss fight from the End of Forsaken's campaign. And finally, we face off against Crota, playing a differently optimized version of the final boss scene at the end of the Crota's End raid from the Dark Below. It starts to get to a point, where the expansion is maybe reusing a bit too much and not offering much of anything new in the process. I mean, this costs money, and I'm really paying for the things I already had before. What are we doing here exactly? If for nothing else, this does lead to one of the most long-term impactful moments in Destiny history so far. As we make our way through the pyramid after defeating these 3 bosses, we discover this statue, a veiled statue. We have no idea what this thing might be, but its image is striking, which inspired tons of theory crafting in the weeks to follow. But by communing with it ever so briefly, the whole expansion comes to a head with an ominous and cryptic cutscene. A scene where our Guardian speaks to themselves, though with the voice of the darkness, giving us just the slightest taste of its intention.
We are not your friend. We are not your enemy. We are your salvation.
What does this mean? I have absolutely no idea. But what this expansion manages to do is let everyone know, both in-universe and in the audience, that the pyramids, the darkness, the thing that caused the collapse all those centuries ago, is coming back. Now it's known by Zavala, by Ikora, by Eris Morn, by you, that this threat is on its way. We don't know how long we have until they show up, but the next leg of Destiny's journey has begun, and I'm sure it's bound to be a massive event once we get that far. Destiny 2 Shadowkeep was not the be-all end-all expansion to change the fabric of the game going forward, but it was an alright launch with some cool enough missions and some grand implications for the future. Reviews were solid enough for this release, if not entirely glowing, with many people getting excited for the promising roadmap heading into the next couple years. For some, there was a level of forgiveness this time around since this was the first expansion Bungie had made entirely on their own. This was the first expansion after Bungie left Activision, so maybe it was bound to be a bit smaller, a bit less extraordinary. But on the other hand, after the incredible Forsaken expansion and all the immense stuff that was able to add to the game, Shadowkeep can't help but feel disappointing in comparison. With as much momentum as Year 2 was able to bring to the game, some people once again dropped off after the release of Shadowkeep. It didn't do enough to keep them engaged in the long run heading into Year 3. But hey, the music's still good. Michael Salvatore, Sky Lewin, Josh Mosser, Michael Seacrest, Rhoda Moab, and Peter Schlosser teamed up here for a brand new soundtrack that features some of the more haunting motifs we're familiar with when it comes to the Hive, both heavy on the action side and even some that are a bit slower. And of course, while the main campaign of Shadowkeep might be complete, there is more that this expansion offers going forward. For one thing, leveling changed rather significantly. The power cap was increased from 750 all the way to 950, giving you a ton of room to level up your Guardian and expand the gear you had. But the power floor was brought up right behind it. Now, any and all Guardians would start at 750 power. Whether you were creating a brand new character or if you'd been playing for thousands of hours, 750 was the floor. But even more surprising than that, the experience leveling system was removed from the game entirely. For every release before this, Destiny was built around an experience leveling system. With Forsaken's release last year, players were able to get all the way to level 50. But since playing the campaigns would get you pretty much there with no sweat, what you get is a bunch of Guardians running around with the number 50 beside their names. The experience level became unhelpful. You'd reach the cap pretty quickly, and then it'd just stay there until the next expansion when it increased to a slightly bigger number. So now, that wasn't even a factor in the game at all. No need to worry about climbing to level 60 or something. That's gone. Instead, the experience leveling system is reincorporated into the Season Pass, because you now have a seasonal rank that can climb forever and ever and ever, with rewards available for the first 100 levels. Because with each rank you increase, you can unlock some new gear, maybe even an engram or some materials as you go along. Like any traditional battle pass, this top row is available to all players, and the bottom row is available for anyone who paid for the Season Pass, which at least for the currently active season comes with any purchase of the Shadowkeep expansion. This was also joined by a new seasonal artifact, which could unlock weapon mods to help empower your Guardian even further. You could even break beyond the power cap and get higher numbers than anyone else with this stuff. It was a rather significant change, but a welcome one. Now the icon next to player names is what class they've chosen, which is at least more helpful if you're interested to know in a flash what abilities they might have during co-op or competitive game modes. At the same time, Shadowkeep introduced the new Armor 2.0 system. For the first 2 years of Destiny 2's lifespan, armor has been seen as mostly cosmetic. There wasn't much else to chase beyond how it looked. But now, the Armor 2.0 system allows you to apply different mods to each individual piece of armor. You could power up the armor to allow space for these mods, even masterwork certain pieces to their fullest potential. If you've got a piece of armor you really like, now you can add new attributes to it and customize it to a greater degree that allows you to change how you played slightly, which is a great addition to build crafting. With the addition of the Moon came a rather significant new public event for players to take part in called the Altars of Sorrow. Like the Blind Well activity released with Forsaken, this was a wave-based game mode where any player in the area would take on a legion of Hive enemies joined by stronger Nightmare Hive. Anytime I popped into this area on the Moon, I saw someone running the Altars of Sorrow, and I did my best to be able to help out, building through the increasing difficulty before reaching the final boss. Defeating it would provide a bit of extra loot. Beyond that event, the Moon also brought with it 4 new Lost sectors for players to explore. There was also a new questline to follow after completing the main story, where you'd hunt down more nightmares across the Moon, each in search of a keepsake from a member of Eris Morn's fire team. Bringing all of these to her allows each of these phantoms to fade away, in one way putting them to rest, and in another way ending their torment of Eris and bringing closure to that aspect of the story. If you've been at all interested in Eris Morn's history and role within this game so far, this is a rather understated yet satisfying chapter on her journey. There are 3 new Crucible maps for PvP players, there are 2 new strikes, one of which is built directly into the campaign, which is a first for Destiny. Usually strikes are additional stuff you can take on after the campaign is complete, or on the side to acquire some better loot. But in this expansion, the strike, the Scarlet Keep, is required to progress through Shadowkeep's story, and it sees you explore the titular Scarlet Keep, facing off against enemies all the way through. You even rise up this cool-looking elevator to fight Hashla Dune, the daughter of Crota. It's pretty big, and it's pretty fun. There's an all-new dungeon called Pit of Heresy, which was released on October 29th, 2019, giving players another challenge to take on after the campaign. There's also a rather significant expansion to the Eververse this time around. The Eververse has of course been a major part of the game since 2015, but now it has become even more unavoidable even for players who have never spent a single cent on silver. Because now, instead of just being a vendor at the tower, the Eververse has its own tab in the director, meaning it's easier to access than ever before. The path to spend more money is shorter than ever. And you're gonna need some silver if you want to pick up the new Season Pass, if you hadn't already gotten it with Shadowkeep. Because Season of the Undying had kicked off, which told the story of how, thanks to the awakening of the Pyramid and our efforts within, the Vex have been alerted to its presence. They're emerging from the Black Garden and storming the Moon en masse, all backed up by the Undying Mind, a reawakened Vex Hydra consumed with the mission of traveling to as many timelines as possible to ensure a Vex-controlled future. Now, like the villains in the expansion, the Undying Mind also isn't new. It appeared during a strike in the original game back in 2014. But it's back, and it's up to the Guardians to purge it from the branching timelines and make sure it cannot stay in the future. Which also factored in with the new raid. Because of course, this expansion came with an all-new raid called Garden of Salvation, which opened just a few days after the expansion's release on October 5th. This saw players journey back to the Black Garden to deal with this Vex uprising, with even more hints towards the eventual future, with yet another glimpse of a veiled statue. The one inside the pyramid was not alone. There are more out there. The question remains, what are they? The first team to beat the raid was known as Clan Ascend. They had managed to make it to the top 5 or top 10 placements for previous raid races, but now they managed to take the championship once and for all, beating the entire thing in 6 hours and 14 minutes. Shadowkeep may not be the biggest or most expansive addition to Destiny in all of its history, and certainly many people were left disappointed by its reuse of previous stuff and in some cases lack of material, on top of the fact that Season of the Undying was mostly weak sauce alongside it. But with the release of Shadowkeep, I really think Destiny 2 finally became the game it was always trying to be. With the new seasonal model implemented and Season of the Undying well underway with Shadowkeep's launch, Destiny had now fully become a live service game. There was no more content drought, there was no more waiting around for the next expansion. At any moment there was something to do. At every corner of the solar system there was an activity to take on, gear to chase, weapons to grind, anything you can think of. The game was a living, breathing organism. And since the first 3 campaigns and most of the larger game was now free to play, I think this was by and large probably the best time to get into it. And I speak from experience when I say that because this is when I came back. And now you're saying, wait, did you leave? And yes, I did. Shortly after the release of Vanilla Destiny 2, I stopped playing the game. There wasn't a specific moment, but the lack of a meaningful endgame really sucked out a lot of the joy I had in playing. The addiction I had during the 2 years I played Destiny 1 went away very quickly. But shortly after the release of Shadowkeep, I learned that not only was the game now on Steam, but the first 3 campaigns were now completely free to play. So I, for one, was in no way fussed that the base game that I had paid for on PS4 was now free, because it made it really easy to jump onto PC and start playing on a new platform without buying the same thing again. I played through the base campaign again, I caught up on what I missed with Curse of Osiris and Warmind, before finally getting out my wallet to pick up Forsaken and Shadowkeep and get right up to date on where the game currently was. It became a lot of fun. I was back on board the Destiny train. It was really easy to get back into it, and I was interested in following the game into the future. A future that was beginning to come through very fast. During a pseudo post-credit scene for Shadowkeep, we revisit Eris Morn, who herself is journeying into the pyramid ship under the moon's surface. She comes into contact with the veiled statue and slowly uncovers the power it holds within. Power that even she, a guardian, could wield. What in the world could that possibly mean? No idea, but Eris sure seems pleased about it. There's no real time to dwell on it though, because with Shadowkeep's lifespan dwindling away and Season of the Undying coming to a close, it was time for players to turn their sights to what came next. On December 10th, 2019, players returned to the game for the launch of Season of Dawn, a season in which we mess around with time. Osiris has returned from the Infinite Forest, and he's called us back to Mercury to help defend this device called the Sundial, which apparently has the ability to open the corridors of time, allowing us to explore different pockets of history. While we have regular old activities built around shooting bad guys to defend it, we also enter the corridors of time ourselves, because this device was actually created with the purpose of going back in time to save a guardian who died many years ago, a guardian who was dearly close to Osiris. Saint 14. Sometimes regarded as the greatest titan who ever lived, he is one hell of a war machine, able to take down bad guys in any which way, with one of his most famous ways being to headbutt them to death. While Osiris made many attempts over the years to try and bring Saint back, it's through our efforts that his mission is ultimately successful. We travel back in time and pull Saint 14 from just before the moment of his death to bring him to the present day. It's a pretty interesting time-bending story, and one that maintains long-term impacts on everything because now Saint 14 is a brand new vendor in the tower, and he will remain a character for all of us going forward. and it creates what many would describe as another pretty fun season. People like Season of Dawn quite a bit, and this particular event of us breaking time to save Saint 14 is considered perhaps one of the most impressive things our Guardian has ever done. We saved a guy from dying in the past. Now he's here as a new character going forward, which is great. But while the corridors of time allow us to peer into the past, they also allow us to peer ever so slightly into the future. Because in a more haunting scene, you can discover your grave. The way Guardians work is that their ghost can revive them over and over again without a second thought, keeping the fight alive. But if by some tragedy your ghost falls, your next death is your last. Cade 6 learned that the hard way. And I guess somewhere down the line we will also fall. Doing what? We don't know yet. All we've got is a grave and a sword. Our path lies before us. Who knows if we can change it or how far ahead it is in our future. Season of Dawn was incredibly well regarded within the Destiny community. The character work was better than most expansions, the inclusion of Saint 14 was incredibly well received by the player base, with tons of people chasing down his themed finisher animation which allowed them to headbutt enemies to death. Classic. Hell, even the power cap was increased to 960. Just 10 more points to make your guy that tiny bit stronger. While the story in-game was obviously interesting and kept things moving, there was one major shift in the state of the world outside the game, because COVID-19 began to break through, sending everyone home in March of 2020. Some of the impacts this would have on the gaming industry were felt pretty quickly, with tons of work now having to transition to home offices and the like. Productivity wasn't stopped in its tracks, but things did have to change. I particularly remember a very fun video from Lance Reddick where he revealed he was recording new lines for Zavala in his closet. On the player side of things, the impacts of COVID were immediate. I mean, suddenly everyone is at home with way more time on their hands than normal. So what you see is a dramatic increase in playtime. More people jumping onto Destiny 2, either people joining for the first time or players jumping in way more frequently to grind away at some of the activities. Destiny 2 in many ways became a haven for people as COVID locked everything down, and something that could keep them occupied for hours at a time while they waited for things to open up again on the outside. And that came with some amount of good timing because on March 10th, 2020, the 10th season of Destiny 2 got started. Season of the Worthy. Now, Season of the Worthy is not nearly as well regarded as Season of Dawn. Many players criticize the seasonal activity for being bare bones and rather boring after a while. And with its lackluster offerings, people began to criticize the seasonal model a lot more as a result. For one thing, it was pretty clear that Year 3's offerings were quite a bit smaller than Year 2. Year 2 featured a few big seasons, with substantial changes and additions in terms of game modes. Not to mention 2 all-new raids for players to take on. But Bungie soon learned that that kind of output every year was unsustainable, especially without the support systems and additional studios that they could call upon while they were working with Activision. Now that they were on their own, it was all up to them, and making that much in a year wasn't going to be feasible. The problem is, players really liked the output for Year 2, and were hoping that Year 3 could follow suit. Unfortunately, the smaller scale made Year 3 a bit more disappointing, and a bit more tedious for longtime players. On top of the fact that the activities and stories within these Year 3 seasons were only in the game for as long as the season was active. Season of Dawn was a well-liked season, but now that Season of the Worthy has kicked off, everything from the last chapter has been completely removed. This created an insane amount of FOMO, the fear of missing out. If you wanted to keep up with the story going on here, you had to be there. You needed to be playing at the pace that Bungie dictated, which many people had an issue with. Bungie would start to change this going forward heading into Year 4, but these larger issues with the seasonal model would persist for as long as it remained in the game. At the very least, with Season of the Worthy, the story does manage to tie up 2 rather significant threads from Destiny 2's first year. The Red Legion, the same invading force that tried to steal the Traveler from us, have gone for a Hail Mary. They've taken their enormous ship, the Almighty, which has sat dormant beside Mercury since vanilla Destiny 2, and have set it on a collision course towards the last city. There's no way to change its course, there's nothing anyone can do to slow it down, it's on its way to the last city to wipe it out once and for all. Which means we have to team up with Commander Zavala and Anna Bray to enlist the help of Rasputin. Rasputin, making this not only a direct follow-up to the Red War campaign, but also a follow-up to Destiny 2's second expansion, Warmind, which also saw Commander Zavala and Anna Bray take on central roles. Anna Bray, of course, has ties back to the Braytech Corporation, which created Rasputin to begin with, and she believes he's here to help. But Zavala is a little more skeptical, not sure if Rasputin will be able to do what it takes to defend the solar system. But as the seasonal story continues, Zavala begins to understand Rasputin a bit better, and grows to believe that maybe he is going to help out when the time comes.
The collapse. You were there. You gave everything to a cause and saw it all swept away. You're afraid to fail. Again. So am I.
But thanks to our character's efforts, we are successful in activating Rasputin's system so he can defend the Earth from the Almighty, which led to the very first live event Bungie had ever attempted in Destiny. Live events are quite common in live service games now. You pop in one day and get some kind of scripted scene that changes the course of the game going forward. You'll see Fortnite do this a lot. You'll pop in for 5 minutes or so and see some kind of big scene featuring a bunch of licensed characters. So Destiny was going to give that a whirl. Towards the end of the season, you could start to see the Almighty become visible in the sky above the tower. Until finally, on June 6th, players would journey to the tower to watch as Rasputin's weaponry finally took it down. I mean, it's right there, hovering in the sky. You see the missiles drawing closer and closer until finally... Players could then watch as its remains careened towards the surface, finally crashing into the mountains behind the tower, ending this saga once and for all. Now, you might think, oh, this is pretty cool. A live event we get to watch from the tower? And yes, it is conceptually very cool. There was only one little problem. It was way too long. Most live events like this go for 5 to 10 minutes. You know, you pop in, watch the thing, and then that's it. You've been there. But in an effort to be somewhat realistic in terms of how long the destruction of the Almighty would actually take, on top of allowing players enough time to experience this, the whole thing took a whopping 90 minutes. So for over an hour, players were just looking up at the sky as Rasputin's missiles slowly drifted closer to the Almighty. It really takes time-lapse shots to actually see the movement that's going on. It's hard to tell otherwise. The only part that really mattered was the last 5 minutes when it finally explodes and crashes in the mountains. That's where the meat is. So it was cool, but also way too long and way too boring. If Bungie were ever to attempt another live event like this, there's definitely room for improvement. But as the season unfolded, there were other activities to take on. Starting on April 21st, players could take part in the all-new free event called Guardian Games. Ever since Destiny first launched in 2014, there had been hearty debates on which class was better. Is it Titans, Hunters, Warlocks? I mean, if you ask me, it's Warlocks, but this was the opportunity to actually prove something in-game. Hosted by Eva Levante in the tower, this sent Guardians on a bunch of activities across the solar system, earning points both for themselves and the class they represented. The event lasted for 3 weeks, allowing Guardians to rise through the scoreboard and fight on behalf of their class. It's kind of like an in-universe Olympics. The problem was, it was also incredibly boring. The main objective to participate in the Guardian Games was to farm bounties, which while they are these fun side tasks you can do while accomplishing a larger mission, they're not really designed to be your main objective. So plenty of players criticize that aspect, but the other major issue is that the whole thing felt rigged. There's an inherent flaw to the Guardian Games as a concept because the population of the 3 classes is not split evenly. Warlocks and Titans both make up around 31% of the player base, while Hunters make up 38%, so by pure numbers they have an advantage. As a result, Bungie put their hand on the scale slightly to make it more fair. But this just meant that Hunters were absolutely destroyed and landed in 3rd place, with Warlocks taking 2nd and Titans sweeping the whole event in 1st place. Sounds great for the Titans, but it didn't necessarily feel like it was won by the virtues of their achievement, more that Bungie had artificially weighted it in their favor, which became a sticking point for every Guardian Games event, as this became the new annual event that players would take part in every spring. The other disappointment during this season was Trials of Osiris. Now, Trials of Osiris was enormously popular during Destiny 1, allowing teams of 3 to compete against each other in Crucible matches more difficult than anything else. There had been an attempt to recapture that with Trials of the Nine during Destiny 2's first year, but after the release of Forsaken, that completely went away. Now, we were back to the standard Trials of Osiris game mode that so many players enjoyed. Sounds fantastic, right? Unfortunately, there was one significant oversight. Since Destiny 2 was on PC, you have to pay a lot more attention to cheaters. It's much easier to hack your game on PC than it is on console. And while apparently Destiny 2 did have some kind of anti-cheat enabled, it wasn't doing its job all that effectively because cheating was able to run rampant across the game mode. While people were really hoping for Trials to give them some long-time fun memories just like it did before, this atmosphere completely changed the outcome. This soured many players' experiences, even resulting in the event getting cancelled on various weekends as Bungie was forced to rapidly solve problems on the fly. At least the power cap was increased this season, jumping from 960 all the way to 1,000. We've crossed into quadruple digits now, it's crazy. And of course, there's some ominous foreboding heading into the future. As players began repairing Rasputin's systems to stop the Almighty, they were also met with this solar system map screen. A screen that highlighted each planet as well as some red triangular objects in the distance. As the season continued, these grew more plentiful and they drew nearer. Until finally, towards the end of the season, players were met with this. Probably one of the most eerie and chilling moments in the game so far. They especially nailed that one musical motif for the pyramids. I mean, it works to make these things frightening every time. But of course, while the seasonal model for Destiny 2 was beefing up across Year 3, it was still not the only way Bungie was going to expand on this story, because they were of course working hard behind the scenes on the next expansion, which would actually begin to break Destiny 2 away from the patterns of the first game. Because after releasing 4 expansions for Destiny 1, Bungie left that game behind. Once Rise of Iron was out, Destiny 1 was left in the past. But now, without Activision stipulating further Destiny sequels, Bungie was going to work hard and continue to add expansions to Destiny 2. Destiny 2 was about to move beyond Destiny 1's roadmap and bring on its 5th expansion, which was finally revealed for the first time on June 9th, 2020. All during a 25-minute live stream reveal hosted by Luke Smith, Destiny 2's game director, and Mark Noseworthy, Destiny 2's general manager, who'd been the leading faces behind Destiny 2 since its launch. Together, they shared some brief details about working on the game has been like during COVID, how things have drastically changed, but that they were still excited for what was going to come next, for the expansion that would kick off Destiny 2's Year 4. This initial teaser doesn't reveal too much, but it shows 3 of Destiny's major characters converge on the all-new destination of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Of these 3 characters, we see the Drifter approaching from space, Eris Morn already on the ground, seemingly controlling the ice around her, and finally, arriving via Sparrow, the Exo Stranger? Hold on, the Exo Stranger is back? Okay, she was one of the most infamous characters from vanilla Destiny 1 because we never learned a single thing about her. She in fact said probably the most infamous line of dialogue from that campaign.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
And after vanilla Destiny 1 wrapped up, we have never heard from her at all. Until now. She's back with a different voice actor this time, with Moira Quirk taking over. And she's the one who brought Eris Morn and the Drifter to investigate a pyramid ship. An active pyramid ship at that, which finally brought the reveal of the expansion's title, Destiny 2 Beyond Light. The meaning of which was soon after revealed by the gameplay trailer, which showed off that for the first time since vanilla Destiny 2, we were going to unlock a new subclass. Only unlike the 3 we currently have equipped, which all channel their powers from the light, this subclass would see us harnessing the powers of the darkness. In terms of implications for the lore, there's really nothing bigger than that. I mean, this whole thing has been about the conflict between light and dark, and the darkness is what ruined humanity during the collapse. Now we're actually going to be utilizing it as a new power, messing around with new abilities on a side of the coin we've never experimented with before. But it also provided a slight bit of closure on that one cryptic cutscene from the end of Shadowkeep, of Eris Morn contacting the Veiled Statue and seemingly taking on some of its power. It's clear now, with the evidence presented in this trailer, that she managed to unlock the powers of this new darkness subclass before we get our chance. What does this mean long term? We'll find out, because this was only going to be the beginning, as both Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy revealed a new trailer going through the years of Destiny so far, chronicling in brief fashion the journey we've undertaken, all before teasing the grand steps we're going to take over the next couple years. Because while this fall we'd see Beyond Light, in 2021 Bungie was going to release The Witch Queen, before finally capping everything off in 2022 with what I can only assume is going to be the Grand Slam finale.
A side should always be taken. Even if it's the wrong side.
In 2022, we were going to get Destiny 2 Lightfall. Clearly this is what we're building to. With the pyramids converging closer and closer, the events of Lightfall are going to bring everything to a head, and Beyond Light was going to be one major step in that direction, the beginning of a trilogy. But as exciting as some of these things were, this stream also talked about something a lot more controversial, because Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy revealed the Destiny Content Vault. They revealed that this game was getting too big, both in terms of file size, which is especially true for PlayStation players, but also in terms of optimization. Every time there's a new major update for the game, things have to be tested and controlled across the entire spectrum of what it has to offer, which is only getting bigger with each year, and was especially true this year since Beyond Light was going to come with a major engine upgrade. What's the solution to this problem? Well, Bungie has decided to remove large parts of the game and place them within the vault. Once Beyond Light is released, the Red War campaign, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind will all be taken out of the game. You will no longer be able to play through these campaigns. Other major portions will also be ripped out. A number of Crucible maps will be removed, 2 Gambit maps are leaving, 4 entire destinations are getting pulled from the game, on top of a number of raids. The Leviathan and its raid layers will be gone, alongside Scourge of the Past and Crown of Sorrow. Huge portions of the game were going to be removed upon Beyond Light's release. Now, I understand the conundrum Bungie finds themselves in. I understand the technical limitations, and I don't know nearly enough about game design to offer a more effective solution. That being said, I believe this is the single worst decision Bungie has ever made for this game. I was perfectly fine with campaigns I'd previously paid for being made free when Shadowkeep came out, but removing that stuff from the game entirely? Come on, dude. I paid for Destiny 2 when it came out and now you're taking it away? But even beyond my own personal desire to go back and play through those stories, I think on a PR level this is devastating. The reputation of Destiny 2 has been tanked considerably because of this decision. Now, people who have never played a second of this game think of it and say, oh, is that the game that removes stuff you paid for? Yeah, that sounds bad. Nothing has ever been more damaging to Destiny 2 than this decision. Now, players will have to relive the memories of these early stories just one last time in the final months leading up to Beyond Light's release. At the very least, that time was extended a little bit, because while the expansion was set to release on September 22nd, due to the continuing complications of COVID, it all got delayed 2 months back to November 10th. which not only means the monumental changes Beyond Light was going to bring were held off for a little bit, it also meant that the current season of Arrivals, was going to last a bit longer. And continuing Bungie's efforts to give these seasons a lot more story material to consistently give players something to experience, this season was a rather significant prelude to the expansions on their way. As teased during Season of the Worthy, the first pyramid ship has entered the solar system and made itself a new home on Io. Right off the bat, the skybox on Io has changed, with this enormous, oppressive pyramid sitting above the valley. It's really quite haunting seeing it for the first time. This threat isn't distant anymore. It's right there in front of you, waiting to strike. And after a while, it's not alone. The first pyramid arrived on Io, but then another emerges on Mercury, another appears on Mars, and finally one arrives on Titan. That last one is probably the most unnerving. All the others we see as a side profile. The one on Mercury is even blocking out the sun, which is pretty significant. But here on Titan, the pyramid is pointed directly at us the entire season. It's like it's staring at us, waiting to pounce. So now we've got to ask, what are these pyramids here for? Well, Eris Morn begins to investigate, trying to communicate with the pyramid on Io, but discovers that its messages to us are being distorted by none other than Savathun. Savathun has been a figure from the deep Destiny lore since 2015. There it was revealed that she was the sister of Oryx, the Taken King. She was one of 3 siblings actually, but Savathun herself was the smartest, most cunning of them all. And across the universe she's also known as the Witch Queen. That's right, this is directly setting up next year's expansion. We might be opening the doorway to Beyond Light right around the corner, but the Witch Queen expansion coming right behind it is getting some time for build-up as well. Now, we don't see Savathun just yet, but her presence is already felt here, as the first taste of where we might be heading in 2021. Gameplay-wise, the arriving pyramids managed to bring out a new public event for players to take on. Events that will randomly occur on each of these destinations as extensions of the pyramid's power, kind of making this one of our first direct confrontations with whatever these things are. The power cap was of course increased from 1000 to 1050, allowing you once again to get just that much more powerful, which is great for taking on the all-new dungeon called Prophecy, which is not only fun for its challenges and art direction, but also the comms chatter you'll hear over the whole thing. Because as you play through, you're joined by both Eris Morn and the Drifter, 2 characters who are in many ways incredibly different, but here their bickering becomes incredibly fun to listen to. I mean, they're snapping at each other, they've got nicknames for each other. Eris Morn calls Drifter Rat, while Drifter calls Eris 3 Eyes. But soon this bickering turns more into respect, as Drifter's nickname for Eris begins to shift to the slightly more endearing Moondust. Destiny has rarely ever had a dynamic like this, but some players quickly picked up on it. There was something here between these two, a completely unpredictable pairing that could prove to be fun in the long run. Eventually, as the festivities began to wrap up, Season of Arrivals came to one rather significant bang, as this promised to be one of the darker chapters in Destiny's story. After slowly discovering the intention of the pyramids, it becomes more clear than ever that they will stop at nothing to destroy everything we know. I mean, the first thing they do this season is knock out Rasputin. After we spent all that time bringing Rasputin up to full strength last season, he's almost completely wiped off the board in seconds by the pyramids. It's nuts. So, with pyramids on 4 different planets, evacuation efforts are put in place to get people back to the safety of the last city. Meanwhile, the Traveler has begun to act in response. For the first time since its awakening at the end of the Red War campaign, an awakening that left its outer shell broken and shattered, it was now beginning to repair itself. In an act of resistance against the ensuing darkness, the Traveler decided to restore itself to some extent as a statement of intent. This thing was gonna go down swinging. And so, at the end of the season, during the game's second and at this point final live event, the Traveler heals its wounds, reforming itself, returning to the state we all remember from Destiny 1. All the while, the pyramids fully claimed the 4 destinations they had set foot on. Anna Bray managed to leave Mars, but Deputy Commander Sloan of Titan, Asher Mir of Io, and Brother Vance of Mercury all stayed behind, with their fates left unknown. What this does is it gives an in-universe reason for why these destinations have been removed from the game. And while I can undoubtedly say that I think removing large swaths of the game like this really sucks, this in-universe explanation is pretty cool. It presents the threat of these pyramids very effectively. They show up, sit there for a couple months, and without even breaking a sweat, 4 destinations are gone from our map. That's nothing to sneeze at. And all of it was in lead up towards the release of Beyond Light, which had now gone full tilt into its promotional efforts. A number of trailers released over the summer revealing some details about the new Stasis subclass, revealing some of the new abilities, grenades, and supers that players were going to be able to get their hands on. Another trailer revealed some new looks at the destination of Europa, all narrated by Varix, a character introduced all the way back in the House of Wolves expansion for Destiny 1, returning for yet another go with the Guardians. Bungie also released a VDoc detailing everything players could expect in Beyond Light, from some story details to the new subclasses, even to the new ways these subclasses will be upgraded and customizable, on top of teases towards the future of Destiny 2 and the first season that will kick off year 4 after Beyond Light's release, which was all finally capped off by the launch trailer, capturing the essence of the story and the new gameplay mechanics in one flashy 2-minute showcase set to an instrumental version of Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones.
In darkness, there is only one truth: death.
All of this finally led to Beyond Light's arrival, and like many Destiny expansions, players could purchase this in a number of ways. They could of course purchase the Standard Edition, which cost $40. They could buy the Standard Edition plus the first Season Pass for Year 4, taking you to $50. You could pre-order the expansion and get some special items like a new Ghost Shell. You could shell out $70 to get the Deluxe Edition, which came with the next 4 Season Passes, taking you all the way through the next year. The Collector's Edition came with some real physical loot for people to look through, all for the low price of $200. And finally, you could spend $130 to get the Stranger Edition, which came with everything in the Deluxe Edition plus a 10-inch statue of the Exo Stranger herself. So, there's that. But now the time has come. Players from across the world were now ready for the next major chapter in Destiny's story, the one that would break things open into the next era of this enormous saga. The clock had turned to November 10th, 2020. So pop on over to wherever you game and get yourself ready, because it's now time to harness the darkness. After the slow arrival of various pyramid ships across the solar system, disappearing planets off of the map, another has arrived on Europa. A previously unplayable location, but one that actually stretches back to some of the earliest concept art for Destiny 1. Clearly Europa as a location was one Bungie was pursuing, and only now in Beyond Light has it made it into the game. And this is a fantastic new location. I mean, it's almost redundant to say that the art direction is once again incredible. This icy surface, the crystals, the caverns, the decrepit structures lost from the Golden Age. There are plenty of nice wide open spaces as well, which is a cool change of pace. There's also a brand new weather cycle. At some moments you'll be running around and it is crisp and clear as day, but soon a blizzard will roll in, drastically reducing your vision, giving the area a whole new feel. You gotta keep your eyes open, because all you'll be able to see of inbound enemies is the slight glow of their weapons. Though no matter what the weather is like, this place always looks incredibly cold. You can almost start shivering just by looking at it. It might be gorgeous on one hand, but hostile at the same time. It strikes that healthy balance. But if you want to get out of the storm, there's plenty of stuff under the surface of Europa. Mainly an enormous Braytech facility that is bright and pristine and seemingly almost untouched for centuries. It's a whole new design aesthetic, extending directly off of what we've seen with Rasputin's architecture to create something even more distinct and unique. And the skybox is once again fantastic here on Europa, with Jupiter hovering on the horizon at all times, featuring its own day-night cycle. And of course, course, the pyramid looms, hovering in the distance as menacing as can be. But the arrival of yet another pyramid is not the only worrying development to kick off this campaign, because a group of Fallen under the command of Aramis have begun to wield the powers of the darkness. One of our old allies, Varix, is now in trouble, trying to flee from this extremist faction of Fallen to ensure the safety of his race, the Elixni. Aramis even rips off one of his robot arms. She's a real piece of work, let me tell you. But now Varix has called on anyone for help, and since you're in town investigating the pyramid, it's up to you to find a way to stop Aramis on her quest to harness the darkness for all of the Fallen and destroy the Traveler. What this all adds up to is an alright expansion. Destiny 2 Beyond Light is, I think, a step up in a lot of ways from the rather small and underwhelming Shadowkeep, but it's nowhere near the heights of something like The Taken King or Forsaken. For all of the promotion suggesting that this would kick off the next era of Destiny, and that this would be the beginning of the next few years, in terms of the scale of the story, it doesn't feel all that much more impactful than a season. In fact, you could argue it's less impactful than one of the seasons, since those were really beginning to shuffle the deck and change up the texture of this world over time. The story told here is a rather forgettable one. Like a lot of Destiny stories, it's really just here to introduce us to some of the new mechanics and the new destination. We're fighting a lot of the same enemies again. This time Europa is populated by the Fallen and the Vex, though there are new adversaries to take on, with the Vex bringing out their new wyverns, which are pretty cool looking. They can even jump at you and throw you a million miles away if they want to. It's crazy. And the Fallen have a new robot enemy called a Brig, which are based directly off of Insurrection Prime from the Scourge of the Past raid. That model was clearly popular enough among the player base and Bungie that it has now become a somewhat frequent combatant for you to take on. But there are some disappointing aspects to this expansion as well, one of which comes with some of our supporting characters. While Varix gets plenty to do as Europa's main vendor, we also have the Drifter, Erismorn, and the Stranger coming in as another part of the story. They even get a really big flashy cutscene featuring tons of cool action moments. It's pretty cool seeing Erismorn especially getting some time to shine during an action scene. It's not something we had ever seen from her at this point, so it's fun. But after this scene wraps up, Erismorn and the Drifter don't do anything in the main story. You can see them sitting there in front of the campfire and they look cool, but they're just hanging out. Aramis as a villain is also a bit lacking, I think. She struggles to really find a presence beyond the fact that she's the big bad guy that we have to fight. But there is a solid expansion into Elixni lore here. It's revealed that the story of this species is honestly not too different from our own. Many years ago, the Traveler once journeyed to their homeworld, providing them with a golden age and a monumental increase in technological prowess. The Elixni called it the Great Machine. But as with all things, it didn't last forever.
But fate intervened. With it came a whirlwind of destruction. In the chaos, the Great Machine fled, abandoning us all.
So the Traveler brought them a haven until things got a little too complicated and it decided to fly away without a word. As a result, many of the Elixni grew angry and vengeful, especially Aramis, who made it her life's mission to hunt down and destroy the Traveler in a quest for revenge. So how do we stop her? Well, that answer comes thanks to the Stranger, because unlike Erismorn and the Drifter, the Stranger does become a character, a new vendor for us to talk to. The reason she's here is to introduce us to the brand new subclass, Stasis. For all of the flaws this expansion might have, this is the big element where it comes through. This is the element the whole thing is built around. Introducing us to our first new subclass since vanilla Destiny 2, the first new element beyond the void, arc, and solar energy we'd been messing around with since Destiny 1. And throughout the story, you are introduced to this new subclass and its various abilities. The whole thing is built around ice crystals, allowing you to freeze enemies in place, create ice structures to platform onto or create barricades with, on top of all new supers for each of the 3 classes. Hunters come in strong with the Revenant subclass, which comes with the Silence and Squall super, allowing them to summon 2 commas and throw them at enemies. Each one has a slightly different effect. One freezes enemies, the other creates a spinning storm of ice, destroying what's left. Titans rocket into the field with the Behemoth subclass, complete with the Glacial Quake super. And in true Titan fashion, this turns their fist into a block of ice that they can use to slam into the ground, freeze enemies, and punch them into oblivion. Finally, Warlocks have the Shadebinder subclass and the Winter's Wrath super, so you can summon a powerful stasis staff. One button can shoot projectiles, freezing enemies, another button sends a pulse wave shattering them within a certain range. Not only is this fun to play around with, it also looks cool and it sounds really cool. I mean, the sound design on these abilities is so sick, let me tell you. There is one rather significant issue, however. The rollout of this subclass is completely different than any other before it. Back in the Taken King and vanilla Destiny 2, when unlocking a new subclass, you got one big mission where you'd be given these new abilities, during which you'd kind of get a few minutes where everything would recharge really quickly, allowing you to become a god on the battlefield for a little bit. After that, the subclass is just yours. You can equip it, you can not equip it, the abilities recharge at the same rate they normally would, but it's there for you to play with and, in the case of Destiny 1, upgrade over time. But here, because of the fact that Stasis is our first Darkness subclass, and there's a lot of stigma around the fact that we're delving into this new realm of powers, the rollout is much slower. Instead of getting one big mission that unlocks these abilities going forward, the campaign instead gives you no less than 7 isolated moments where you get to use Stasis to your heart's content. At certain points, you'll be allowed to commune with the darkness and utilize stasis powers for only a couple minutes. At other points, the stranger will tell you to go to the structure that has split off from the pyramid called a ziggurat. This will send you on a brief side mission where you get to hone your abilities with stasis a bit more. In all of these events, your abilities recharge really fast, which is cool, allowing you to go absolutely insane, but once these moments are done, the game takes stasis away from you again. You're back to using your boring, pathetic old light subclasses again. Yuck. I understand the in-universe reason for why we unlock this differently than just getting new light abilities. You know, this is the first time we've communed with the darkness like this, but it's still disappointing every time the subclass is taken away from you. Just when you start getting the hang of it and want to keep messing around in future levels, the game takes it away. At the same time, there's also a bit of a narrative disconnect here, which once again comes from our Ghost. Back during the Forsaken expansion, our Ghost was really concerned about our revenge quest to hunt down Uldren Sov. He wasn't sure if it was really the right thing to do, to which we said, "Whatever, man, I'm still gonna kill this guy." Here, our Ghost is especially concerned by our use of the darkness. He doesn't really like that we're taking this on. He's a being of light, and using the darkness is just antithetical to everything he is.
I'm here to fight for the light, and so are you. If this is how we're going to do it, I'll be by your side. But we are toying with power neither of us understand, and I have no control over it. If anything happens to you, I may not be able to help, but I'll do what I can.
He's making it really clear that using the darkness like this is totally unprecedented and perhaps very dangerous, which I'm sure it is in-universe. But I do feel a slight disconnect as a player, because while the Ghost is saying be careful, I'm over here going, look at me, I have ice powers now, yo! It kinda takes away from the supposed seriousness of all this. Now, of course, we're not alone in our stasis usage, because sometimes the fallen enemies, namely the bosses throughout the game, will also be using stasis powers against us. So on a gameplay level, you gotta be on the ball to make sure they don't freeze you in place. It's one thing to freeze them, it's another thing entirely when they freeze you. But it highlights the specific differences between us and Aramis, and the ultimate core of the darkness as a power. The darkness is not necessarily evil on its own. Aramis herself is just fueled by anger and vengeance and is using the darkness as a means to an end. A means to a rather selfish end. But we, the Guardians, are using the darkness to help other people. We're not using it out of anger or a quest for revenge, we're using it as another ability on our tool belt to help us stop the bad guys. And when it comes to the final boss in the game, when we finally take on Aramis one-on-one, it is that key difference that finally gives us an edge.
The only thing we have to break here is you.
And in one final swoop, we utilize the powers of stasis to take down Aramis once and for all. Thanks to our efforts, her plans are thwarted as she is left frozen, reaching out towards a pyramid that will not answer. It's not a perfect story, it's not a terribly fleshed out story, but this basic arc of learning to wield stasis over time does come to a fairly satisfying close. Now, with the main story completed, we're sent to the Ziggurat one last time to unlock the subclass fully, which even gives us yet another moment to commune with one of the veiled statues. Meaning we can now equip it and use it like any other subclass. Only this one has a whole new upgrade system featuring fragments and aspects that change up how some of your abilities work. All of the subclasses in the game have been criticized since the launch of Destiny 2 for being rather simplistic and unrewarding in terms of their customization. But with Stasis, you now had the ability to actually change up how the subclass worked, which abilities you could hold and what attributes they could take on, which was a nice change of pace. It was the first of many promising steps on the path to creating more rewarding and more impactful subclasses that could hopefully hold a candle to the customization present in Destiny 1. Overall, Beyond Light is not a slam dunk of an expansion, but it is relatively solid on its own, bringing about new, exciting additions to the Destiny universe. Reviews were fairly positive, if not over the moon, with some reviews even highlighting that this was a step up in terms of storytelling. It might not be fantastic, but Destiny's always struggled there, so a marginal improvement is still an improvement. And things continued in a positive way as players soon entered the Endgame. Once again, the power cap got an enormous boost with this expansion, jumping from 1050 all the way to 1250. And like Shadowkeep before it, the floor was also raised. Instead of Guardians starting out at 750, they now started at 1050, getting everyone to about the same level to gear up with the new weapons and armor that you could acquire in this expansion. At the same time, your seasonal rank is now displayed beside your username. So instead of players seeing your class icon, they can now see how far you've progressed in the season from 1 to, well, hundreds, really. There are 3 new lost sectors for players to explore on Europa. We have 2 new strikes, one of which, like in Shadowkeep, is built directly into the expansion's campaign, while the other is an additional activity you can take on after the fact. Of course, Europa brings with it a new patrol space with some public events to take on. There was a fair amount added in the PvE space for Beyond Light, but to the ire of many fans, PvP was left almost completely in the dust. For every expansion Bungie has ever released, there has always been a handful of new Crucible maps for players to fight it out on. But in Beyond Light, there are none, which seemed to tell people that Crucible was far from the top of Bungie's priorities when updating this game. And with the Destiny Content Vault removing a batch of maps from the mode, Crucible only became smaller. Not to mention, the introduction of Stasis mucked up the whole works for PvP. It was crazy. Suddenly, players could get frozen, walls and platforms could be built by others. It just added a whole new dynamic that clearly the Crucible was not built for, and it caused frustration for a great many players. Bungie would alter Stasis a little bit in the weeks and months that followed, but in the immediate wake of Beyond Light's launch, Stasis was a plague upon PvP. The most significant aspect of the expansion's endgame, though, has to be the additional story material, because even after defeating Aramis and completing the main campaign, there's a ton more to explore in the following weeks. For one thing, you can help Varix continue to clean up Europa, dealing with several other fallen enemies that are trying to fill the power vacuum Aramis left behind. For another, Erismorn and the Drifter finally get a little bit of play in the story. The Drifter especially helps you to acquire a stasis-powered grenade launcher. But by far the most significant aspect of the story comes with the Exo Stranger. After years of players knowing nothing about this character, rather infamously, she finally has some time to explain who she is and where she comes from. She reveals that she is actually from another timeline, an alternate universe where the force behind the darkness managed to win, leaving the entire universe to fall for eternity. In fact, in one of the new lore books introduced with Beyond Light, you can read all about her adventures in the other timeline, getting more specific about who died, who turned bad, and how everything went to hell. All before the Stranger's journey reset back to our timeline, implying that she's somehow trapped in a long-lasting loop of horrors, a loop that she is desperately trying to escape. And on top of all of that, she reveals her name. We may know her as the Exo Stranger, but her real name is Elizabeth, or more commonly, she's referred to as Elsie Bray. That's right, she is another descendant of Clovis Bray. She was his granddaughter who became afflicted with a genetic disease. In order to survive, she was reborn as an Exo, one of the first Exos actually. This also means she is the sister of Anna Bray, which leads to a pretty big reunion between the two characters, which is summed up as the reunion between the character who wanted to forget her past and a character who spent her whole guardian life searching for it. Which even brings a lot of closure on Anna Bray's side of things, as we also discover this enormous Exo head deep underground, complete with an AI system that was programmed with Clovis Bray's memories and personality. Which means in some strange way, the original Clovis Bray manages to survive, uniting him with his granddaughters however many centuries later. This is an enormous corner of the story getting a rather significant expansion, and it's crazy how easy it is to skip this stuff over. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's in here for the most hardcore daily players who will do all of the hardest tasks within the game. And it goes to show that there's a whole lot more to these expansions than just the central 8-mission campaign. All of this is built into the all-new raid called Deepstone Crypt, so named after its premier location, which as it turns out, is the birthplace of the Exos. Released on November 21st, 2020, a week and a half after the main expansion, teams of 6 journeyed to the Deepstone Crypt to uncover its mysteries and fight off against more fallen enemies. But to the shock of many Day 1 players, the presentation on this raid was on another level previously unseen. Things start off on the surface of Europa, seeing players explore the Deepstone Crypt and even find yet another veiled statue. That's big. But to the surprise of everyone playing the raid for the first time, players were eventually launched into space. They were rocketed to an orbital satellite for the entire middle stretch of the raid. This was a major highlight for many people's raiding experience, providing a bunch of new challenges and new explorations into Braytech secrets. It even featured one of the most beloved pieces of music in Destiny history, because while you're up here on this satellite, you are faced with a jumping puzzle to proceed to the next area. Not only are the visuals fantastic, but the music slows down into a piece called Deepstone Lullaby. It's slower, it's more ethereal, it's really quite incredible. Many would joke that they just wanted to sit still for a while and let the music wash over them. It was that good. Once again, the music team featuring Michael Salvatore, Sky Lewin, Josh Mosser, Michael Seacrest, and Rhoda Moav absolutely killed it with this expansion's music. It's not just Deepstone Lullaby that hits, practically everything in here is fantastic. I especially like the main motif that they used for the title screen. That's good stuff. Eventually, the raids saw this satellite crash back down onto the surface, returning players to where it all started, the entrance to the deep stone crypt. Only this time, debris has marked the area, and now they're set to face off against the ultimate final boss. A boss set up briefly during the campaign, an all-new creation orchestrated by Aramis, the return of Taniks. Now, this was criticized a bit since we've seen Taniks a number of times in these games so far, but that's also become part of his whole shtick. He consistently comes back. And now he's more machine than organic. His arms are robotic, and his whole bottom half is combined with the Saber 2 shank from all the way back in the fallen Saber Strike from the Taken King. People even started referring to him as Shanix because of this, which is fun. Finally, the team known as Luminous were the first to beat Deepstone Crypt, completing the challenge and defeating Taniks in just 5.5 hours, marking a raid experience for the history books. Beyond Light brought many things to the table for Destiny 2. A new subclass, a new destination, a solid enough campaign, though not without its flaws, and plenty of additional material for people to dive into for the weeks to come. But there was one major elephant in the room that required addressing. Because, of course, the Destiny content vault had now come into effect, which didn't just pull certain campaigns and activities out of the game, it also sunsetted a number of old weapons. Several weapons from the early days of Destiny 2 were now artificially capped. You could not infuse them or collect them beyond a certain power level. The game was forcing you to leave some old gear behind to focus on the new stuff on offer from this expansion. Of course, players took a lot of umbrage with this because they had worked hard for a lot of this stuff and Bungie was forcing them to let it go. This is not necessarily a new concept, as it was introduced all the way back during the Taken King expansion in 2015, which sunset a number of Destiny 1's Year 1 weapons, but it's never been that popular of a move overall. But there was no escaping the larger parts of the Destiny content vault. The Red War, Curse of Osiris, Warmind, and a number of raids and planets were now gone, with no way to ever access them again. Nostalgia for some of the old campaigns may be minimal, but people did enjoy a lot of the destinations. You'll hear a lot about how players just like to hang out on Titan or something and bask in the waves. Now they can't do that anymore. As a result, despite Beyond Light adding as much as it did, it ultimately managed to remove much more. The entire experience feels a lot more bare than it did just a few months ago. There's a lot less to do despite all the new stuff to do. But even more significantly than that, it impacted an element of the game I don't think anyone was actually thinking about when the content vault was first announced. It impacts the new player experience. On one hand, new players will now never get to experience the first 3 campaigns. Some might say that's not a huge loss in the case of Curse of Osiris and Warmind, but I think it's good to at least give players the choice. Without those, not only do new players coming in universally feel like they're missing things, but the actual introductory quest does not make up for what's been lost. Since the game was made free, once you created a new character, you played through the opening level of Destiny 1 in one section of the Cosmodrome before being shuttled off to the tower to do whatever you wanted, really. Now, a much larger section of the Cosmodrome has been added as a playable destination. It's not the whole thing from Destiny 1, it's only about half of it, and new players are sent on a brand new questline to introduce them to this world. Now, since I was curious, for this video I decided to create a new character to see what this questline is all about. Of course, I'm not a wholly new player, so this isn't going to have that totally fresh perspective a truly new player would have, but I wanted to see what this offered. I once again created an Exo Warlock, designing them exactly as I did in Destiny 1, only this time I made them female to switch things up. Female Optimus Prime. Now there's a concept for you. Are these two characters related? Did she transition between games? It's up to you. Choose your own adventure. Things start as they usually do. You're given the opening cutscene on Mars introducing the Traveler, before you eventually awaken in the Cosmodrome to play through the first level of Destiny 1. But instead of finding yourself a ship that'll take you to the tower right away, you're introduced to this all-new character named Shah Han. He is going to be your guide through this new light questline here on Earth. He's alright as a character. There's not much really remarkable about him, except for the fact that players noted he looked a bit like famous Destiny streamer and YouTuber Aztecross, which has become something of an in-joke within the community.
Nasir commented a picture of us, and Destiny 2 team right here. That's a weird picture of Shaw. I I just need to know who at Bungie decided to make me, whose cruel joke was to add me to the game and to make me a hunter.
With Shah Han, you go on a couple small missions that, to my surprise, were really just mild refreshes of the early campaign levels from Destiny 1. Almost beat for beat in terms of design, just with some slight differences in story. You're here trying to avenge some of Shah's guardian friends and take down a hive witch called Navota. It's relatively standard, introducing you to the Fallen and the Hive here on the Cosmodrome, all before sending you to the tower to introduce you to Amanda Holiday, Master Rahul, Banshee 44, the Drifter, Ikora Ray, and Commander Zavala. The idea is clearly to introduce some of the central aspects of the game, but with one rather significant flaw. It's not very exciting. It's hard to say whether or not this would be an effective introduction to a wholly new player, but I can pretty easily say that I can understand if this doesn't sell you. Comparisons can easily be made to how Destiny 1 began, and while Destiny 1 was heavily flawed on the storytelling front, somehow those early missions managed to spark that sense of curiosity that kept many players engaged for the long haul. I don't think this particular questline offers that strange sense of mystery that will lock players in. It's a really short, standard questline that introduces you to a handful of characters and then throws you to the weeds. Once you're done with this quest, you're left to do whatever you want. Now that might sound fantastic on paper, but for a new player with no experience in this world before, how the hell are you supposed to figure out what to do next? You're just given all of these destinations and the ability to do something. At least before, it was a rather easy path to go from entering the tower to starting the Red War campaign and following that to the finish line. But now, what is a new player who's only downloaded the game for free supposed to do? Because the 3 currently available campaigns, Forsaken, Shadowkeep, and Beyond Light, all cost money right now. The only free activities are public events and patrols, which are not going to get a new player hooked. So in a way nobody really anticipated, removing the earlier campaigns from the game in favor of this refurbished new Light questline actually destroyed the game's onboarding. It becomes a hell of a lot harder for any new player to get on board and get truly invested in the goings-on of the story. So many people have asked, when will this stuff come back? The way the Destiny Content Vault was presented is that older campaigns and the like would be filtered out of the game to eventually be brought back somewhere down the line, refurbished and freshened up to fit whatever state the game would be in. But as we now know, that's probably not going to happen. In 2025, Bungie was faced with a plagiarism lawsuit, where someone alleged that the story of the Red War campaign and eventually Curse of Osiris was lifted from his writings. Whether or not the plagiarism accusations are true is another question, but the real takeaway is that Bungie, in trying to present evidence of the Red War campaign, couldn't actually give the real game itself. They provided a cutscene compilation and a My Name is Bife lore video. They admitted themselves that there is no currently playable build of the Red War. So it's not just locked in a vault, it's gone. And the same is likely true of everything else that's been filtered into the vault. It's gone. Of course, this got them into more trouble because failing to provide sufficient evidence allowed that case to go forward. And Bungie eventually settled last month. So the campaigns are gone, large portions of the onboarding experience have been devastated, and it is now incredibly difficult to get into Destiny 2 as a result. That being said, it's not impossible. Many players have been able to jump on board since the release of Beyond Light and have become long-lasting players. It's a lot more difficult now, but not downright impossible. And of course, a new avenue to jump on board came right at the end of 2020 because Destiny 2 launched on next-gen consoles. That's right, with the release of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, Destiny made the leap onto the new hardware with 4K resolution and 60 FPS capabilities. Better yet, you could also continue to migrate your existing characters so long as you were jumping within the same console family. If you're going from PS4 to PS5 or Xbox One to Xbox Series X, you could carry over your characters and your expansions completely free of charge, making it a seamless upgrade, which was perfect timing for those willing to engage with the still ongoing story. With Beyond Light's release, Destiny 2's Year 4 had kicked off, which meant 4 more seasons before the Witch Queen would release in the fall of 2021. So even with the expansion itself having wrapped up, players with the Season Pass could now engage with Season 12, Season of the Hunt. With 4 destinations wiped off the map, a power vacuum has surged, and villains across the solar system are doing their best to fill it. This season, the Hive God of War Zivua Wrath is trying to capitalize on the chaos the Black Fleet has wrought. She is of course sister to Oryx the Taken King and Savathun the Witch Queen. But of course, things kick off with the baffling decision to kill Sagira off-screen. Do you remember Sagira? She was Osiris's ghost during the Curse of Osiris expansion. She was voiced by Marina Baccarin. Yeah, well, she's dead now. She died off-screen with no fanfare, and now we've got to go head out and save Osiris. But maybe we're not going to be able to get there in time. Osiris is in trouble and we can't reach him. What's he gonna do?
We warned you it was going to be dangerous down here.
Oh dear. Aldrin Sov has returned. The Prince of the Awoken, brother to the Queen, and the murderer of Cade 6 who we hunted down and killed back in the Forsaken expansion. So how on earth is he back? Well, it's not really him anymore. Back during Forsaken's Endgame, a ghost named Glint circled the Dreaming City until it found Aldrin's body and revived him as a Guardian. And of course, Guardians are born with no memory of their past selves, so while he might look like Aldrin Sov, he might even act like Aldrin Sov sometimes, he has no memories of that life, no knowledge of what he did to Cade. Now he calls himself the Crow, which is actually a bit of a full circle moment for the game that ties back to its earliest versions. Back in 2013, Bungie revealed the first look at gameplay for Destiny. This was back before the entire story got rebooted and they were still working off of the version Joseph Staten was cooking up, and it revealed this guy, who was going to be named the Crow, a Guardian with a roguish Han Solo-like personality that would join us on this adventure. But after the entire story got upended and changed, his character model was instead reused for the Awoken Prince Aldrin Sov, and since that became canon, he just stuck around as that character for a long time. But now, as a Guardian, he's finally become the Crow he was always meant to be. And it's gotta be one of the most interesting story decisions this game has ever made. I mean, one of the game's best villains, one of the few it successfully got us to hate, has come back as our ally. With tons of details about how he noticed how other Guardians looked at him, how he was able to surmise he wasn't the most popular guy in his past life. Now he's working for the Spider on the Tangled Shore, but on a leash. The Spider knew Aldrin Sov just as much as we did, if not more so he decided to place a bomb within Glint's ghost shell, in case Crow ever decided to go running. But what I think is fun about this is that despite the rest of the world looking down upon Crow, responding to him negatively because of what Aldrin did, our Guardian decides to be more kind. And it's after completing the seasonal activities and avenging the death of Sagira that we have enough bargaining power with the Spider to ask for Crow's freedom. We may have been the one to pull the trigger and kill Aldrin, but we recognize that Crow is in many ways a different person, someone who doesn't have to be defined by his past. So we make a new ally in the place we'd least expect, as our efforts manage to open a new chapter of the story, letting the Crow become a far better man than he was before.
Why would you do this for us?
Because you're a Guardian.
As 2021 kicked off, players were beginning to grow in anticipation for this year's expansion. The Witch Queen was promised to arrive in the fall of 2021, 1 year after Beyond Light, and with teases already being placed in-universe, there's a lot for players to look forward to. But of course, the lingering effects of COVID-19 managed to change things up a little bit. Players might have thought that Beyond Light's delay from September to November 2020 would be the end of it, but no. The Witch Queen would still feel reverberating effects, getting pushed back from November 2021 all the way to February 2022, meaning that 2021 would be the first year since Destiny's launch back in 2014 that there was no major expansion release, which is crazy. It's been an annual occurrence by this point, like a holiday to some extent for Destiny players. We always knew there was something around the corner that year, but this time we've got to wait until 2022 for the next major chapter in this game's story. But this also had an effect across everything that would come after The Witch Queen, as the next expansion, Lightfall, was also pushed from November 2022 to February 2023. But in a surprise turn, despite the fact that it seemed Lightfall was going to be the grand finale of the universe so far, Bungie revealed that their plans were a tiny bit bigger. Lightfall was only going to be the beginning of the end, and another expansion was going to be released after that, presumably set for some time in 2024. What was that expansion? We didn't know yet, but it was a surprising announcement for Destiny's future, and the finish line for this enormous saga that would in fact take 10 years to complete, just like they said it would back when the game first came out. So the future was getting pushed back and even expanded slightly, with players keeping their eyes out on the next 3 years of Destiny 2 to bring everything to a close. For now, they could continue to explore the seasonal stories throughout Year 4, because we still have some chapters to explore throughout the year. At this point, the delivery method for seasons became somewhat standardized. The model had found a form for itself. Players will get to take on a new seasonal activity, with both the loot pool and the story resetting every Tuesday, allowing them to take on the next small chapter over the 3-month period. These gameplay activities mostly became public event sorts of things. You go to a place, you kill a bunch of guys in a holdout sort of game mode, and then you move on. In many ways, the gameplay experience of these seasons began to stagnate after a while. You can only run these events so many times before you start to notice how similar they are. But for those interested in the long-term story, there was something to chew on this time. Following on from the reveal of the Crow last season, this whole year is kind of about how we can find allies in the most unexpected places. Season of the Chosen centers entirely around a potential alliance between our Guardians at the Tower and the Cabal Empire led by Keitel. The Cabal have of course been one of our biggest enemies. The Red Legion stole the city from us one time, but now their current leader Empress Keitel, the daughter of the exiled Emperor Callus, is open to forming some kind of alliance, though at first not necessarily on the nicest terms with us.
With my army and your light, the Cabal will crush the Hive. Then, the Black Fleet. Bow.
No.
Hell yeah, Zavala, stand on business. Love that simple no. Letting Keitel know that we Guardians aren't just gonna bend the knee to an empire. If we want an alliance, it has to be more mutual than that. But there is an alternate version of this scene, though not an official one. As one fan was inspired enough to write up this version, which probably spoke to a lot more of what was going on in Zavala's head, or at least what was going on in all the players' heads at this point. Now, there's a lot of text here, so I'm not going to read it. Instead, Lance Reddick is going to read it, because this image was sent his way just after the cutscene was released, and he took some time out of his day to record a video of him reading it out loud in character as Commander Zavala, which has become one of the best highlights in all of Destiny's history.
Bow.
Excuse me? One fucking Guardian has been kicking your race's collective asses for 9 years. They killed gods for fun and to turn them into guns for a meme. They genocide entire races for loot. They assassinated your last leader, cleaned out your daddy's ship, while he wrote fan fiction about them and promptly fucked off to let you pick up the pieces. The only reason I didn't bring them here is because they casually began wielding the darkness to clap ass in new ways. All I have to do to make them end you is to tell them you have a fancy new gun, or that Eris can make you into one. So, think about that before you tell us to bow to your sorry ass.
That's awesome. Ultimately, we are able to form something of an alliance with Keitel's empire, which changes the dynamic in many ways. While Cabal forces will still be out there for us to kill, they've been branded as traitors to the larger empire, trying to fight for some lost ideals that Keitel herself no longer truly believes in. The Cabal aren't even the only friends we make here, because in Season of the Splicer, we also join forces with a group of Elixni known as the House of Light. Led by Mithrax, these Eliksni are not out to kill us at all. They're simply on the lookout for a new home, and with challenges facing the city, they become a fantastic helping hand. And with the addition of baby Eliksni, you can rest assured that active players almost immediately fell in love with this new band of allies. Now we've got Eliksni friends populating the tower, even populating the all-new seasonal space called the Helm. This new base of operations within the tower that we can use to access the seasonal missions and quest lines to our heart's content. This is also where we meet the Crow, who actually becomes a true story vendor through these seasons. You know, he's an active character within the last city now. Though to start, no one knows his identity. No one's seen his face. By the advice of Osiris, Crow wears a mask to cover up who he is. He himself still doesn't know who he is, but he understands that his past life must have caused some hurt. So for his safety, it's best if he keeps himself concealed. But through life-threatening circumstances, in an attempt to save Zavala's life from an assassination attempt, Crow's identity is fully revealed. It's a really big moment. Zavala is met face to face with the man who killed Cade 6, a man he thought was dead. And yet here he is. He's back as a guardian, and he's just saved Zavala's life. This moment is properly impactful, and it became an instant fan favorite beat that players were immediately on board with, especially considering it served as a mirror to a couple moments from Forsaken, not only of Aldrin standing over Cade ready to kill him, but our Guardian and Petravenge standing over Aldrin at the end, ready to kill him. Things change fast out here, but now we've got a bunch of new friends joining us along for the ride. But there are also some enemies festering within the tower. The arrival of the Eliksni causes some strife, as some within the tower are not super thrilled about their presence. In fact, Lakshmi too, who has been almost completely absent for a couple years now, becomes a significant presence during Season of the Splicer. She begins to sow distrust, anger, and resentment among the citizens of the city. She's spreading false information, lies, and hateful rhetoric about the Eliksni to turn the city against them. This season is in many ways a mirror to how disinformation at such a rampant pace can disrupt the peace and turn people against each other, when in actuality they're really all on the same team. It even allows us to understand the Eliksni better and approach them in more respectful ways. While his name might be Mithrax when we're introduced to him, we learned that was a mispronunciation of his real name, Mithrax. The season also goes to great lengths to unify the Eliksni and Saint 14. Mithrax tells a story of how Saint 14 became the stuff of nightmares for the Eliksni, a warrior that no one was able to escape from alive.
It could die, but it would not stay dead. It would shake off the rot and rise again.
But now, the Eliksni are living side by side with Saint 14 in the city, and both parties have to come to grips with that and accept the scenario with open arms. Their pasts and differences have to be put aside because of the fact that they're now fighting for a common goal: to survive. But the most shocking part of this season is that apparently Lakshmi's efforts to sow dissent in the city are being propelled in some ways by Osiris. What? I thought Osiris was a good guy. Why is he helping Lakshmi sow chaos? He even manages to open a gateway allowing for a Vex invasion. What are you doing, dude? There's gotta be something going on with Osiris. None of this feels right. Ultimately, this Vex invasion manages to kill Lakshmi. Our heroes of the tower join forces with Mithrax and the House of Light to fend off the remaining invaders, ultimately saving the city and everyone within once and for all. It's a victory all around. But Osiris has vanished, and no one, not even Saint 14, knows where he's gone. At the very least, we got some increases to the power cap. Season of the Chosen brought the power cap to 1300, and Season of the Splicer brought it up from there to 1310. Not to mention, throughout all of this, players also noticed that one of the lead characters in this game began to sound a tiny bit different. Since the release of Destiny 1, the Warlock Vanguard Ikora Rey has been voiced by Gina Torres. But starting with Season of the Splicer, her voice is taken over by Mara Juno. and she's doing a very good job. I mean, her voice sounds scarily similar to Gina Torres, with that same level of timbre and impact that makes Ikora stand out. There are moments where you can notice differences, but you soon get used to this new sound for Ikora as she continues to be a central character going forward. At the same time, as 2021 continued, there were a number of positive changes and even events during this year that players were eating up. Some intentional, some definitely not. On the intentional side, there was a crucial change made to sunsetting. The original plan was that weapons would have a shelf life lasting about a year max. So not only were old weapons artificially capped, but the current ones would also be capped sometime in the future. That was changed this year, allowing players to continue to hang on to any new weapons they had for as long as they wanted. At the same time, shaders were now no longer consumable items. Ever since the launch of Destiny 2, shaders were one-time use only, which people hated. But now, after 4 years, Bungie finally changed this and made it so that you could use all of your shaders as many times as you want, which was fantastic. Then you had the new exotic quest called the Presage, which managed to be a major highlight for players during this year. A quest taking you into this abandoned and haunted ship. It's Destiny stretching its horror muscles in a way it hadn't quite done before, at least not to this extent, and people enjoyed running this mission many times as the weeks progressed. But then we get to the unintentional side, because in February of 2021, players managed to do something they never thought was possible. Through some in-game glitch, players discovered that they had the ability to combine several fire teams when taking on some of the biggest, toughest activities. While something like raids were built for 6 people, players were able to cheese the system and get 12 people into one activity. 12-player raids became a reality here. People were able to jump into the toughest activities with double the amount of players as normal, which allowed for tons of chaos and tons of fun. It could even work in dungeons and nightfall strikes. It definitely took away a lot from the difficulty, but boy did it allow for people to have a newfound lease on the enjoyment these activities could bring. Many were calling this the best Destiny glitch to date, and it created tons of fun memories for players across the board. Of course, Bungie did eventually patch this out, but that was easily predictable and allowed this to become a brief window of fun that people were able to enjoy while it lasted. There were some negative aspects to the year, however. Despite many fun changes and additions, there were some others that felt a lot more criticism. Guardian Games was back for its 2nd year, and it still felt a little boring. More hunting for bounties to accomplish simple, uninteresting tasks. And Bungie's finger was still on the scale. After overcorrecting to make sure hunters didn't win in 2020, they weighted things differently this year, resulting in easy-to-predict results. Titans came in 3rd place this year, Warlocks came in 2nd, and Hunters, the most popular class, took the whole thing away. The balancing of this event has yet to be figured out. Like, purely based on pattern recognition, I can almost guarantee that Warlocks are gonna win next year. And no, it's not just because I'm a biased Warlock main. What are you talking about? At the same time, in April of 2021, a new system called Transmog was introduced. This was heavily sought after by the player base. Transmog allowed you to create ornaments out of any piece of armor so that you could alter the appearance of another piece of armor. Say you like the attributes of this chest piece, but the look of a different chest piece. Well, by creating and using this ornament, you can keep the attributes and the look, which was great for build crafters and for the fashion fans within Destiny, 2 very big parts of the player base. This all sounds fantastic until you realize that you need to grind an insane amount to get the materials necessary to create these ornaments. Not to mention, every season featured a cap on how many ornaments you could actually get, so you had to be selective on how many you wanted to create. Unless you popped over to the in-game Eververse store to buy more materials. There's no cap there. So get out your wallet, buy some silver with real money, and get yourself some new materials to create some ornaments. What was, on one hand, an incredible new feature was sullied in a major way by its implementation, and has been the thorn in many people's side ever since. At the very least, there was a new challenge for players to take on during Season of the Splicer, though admittedly it wasn't exactly a new challenge. Bungie decided, in order to keep up a bit more of a frequent raid release schedule, that they'd begin porting over old Destiny 1 raids into Destiny 2. These experiences that players really enjoyed from the first game would be available to take on in the currently active sandbox. And so, on May 22nd, 2021, the very first raid that Destiny ever had, the Vault of Glass, was brought forward into Destiny 2. And it was just as exciting as players remembered, with a couple of subtle alterations to adapt it into this sandbox. Not only were some of the new abilities considered, but some new enemies like wyverns were added, which didn't exist back in Destiny 1. But despite being a raid that players already knew fairly well, it did feature an all-new Day 1 raid race. Once again, the most dedicated and hardcore teams could tackle it as soon as it dropped in order to be the first team to complete it before anyone else, with the reward still being a physical championship belt for every member of the winning team. But since Vault of Glass was a reprised raid and not entirely new, there was a new aspect added here for the Day 1 race. Players had to beat the raid twice. The first time would be on normal mode, just progress through the raid as you normally would, but after completing that, players would have to tackle it again on challenge mode. This meant that for every encounter, players had to also complete an additional challenge in order to proceed to the next area. The first team to beat both normal and challenge mode would take the title of World's First. So despite being a raid players were familiar with, the Day 1 race still provided new aspects that players didn't expect, and would test the teams preparing to take it on. Ultimately, after all was said and done, Team Elysium managed to take home the belt. They had come exceptionally close before, coming in second place during the Deepstone Crypt race last year. But now, they beat the normal Vault of Glass in just 1 hour and 43 minutes, and managed to complete the entire challenge after 4 hours and 13 minutes, taking home the crown. Their first win and a big championship for the first reprised raid in Destiny 2's history. Now, as much fun as it might be to look backwards, there was still a ton of excitement to be had in looking forwards. The next major chapter was on its way, and finally, as the summer continued, Bungie began to really pull back the curtain on what it was set to entail. They began to tease the full arrival of Savathun.
Truth is a funny thing.
On August 24th, Bungie did a big live stream called the Destiny 2 Showcase for 2021. This was the place players would go to discover Bungie's plan for the year ahead, primarily when it came to the next expansion, the Witch Queen. This was introduced by the two new stewards to the Destiny universe. In years past, Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy had been leading the charge as game director and general manager respectively, but now two new faces had stepped up to the plate in their stead. Game directing duties had now been taken over by Joe Blackburn, who joined Bungie back in 2015 and had been part of the Destiny raid team for years, working on, bear with me, King's Fall, Wrath of the Machine, Leviathan, Eater of Worlds, Spire of Stars, Last Wish, Scourge of the Past, and Crown of Sorrow. Beyond that, he was the creative director on the season of Opulence, which many fans really enjoyed, and has since upgraded to becoming the full-on game director for the Witch Queen expansion. And alongside him, Justin Truman was the new general manager. He'd been with Bungie since 2009. He was part of the engineering team on Halo Reach and the original Destiny, before advancing into more leadership positions around the development of Shadowkeep in 2019. Together, they were leading the charge on this next major chapter, which of course was getting hinted at throughout this past year, but now the doors were going to be blown wide open with this expansion. Savathun was about to make her grand in-game debut. Players would journey to her throne world, the newest destination, to hunt her and her hive army down once and for all. But while that sounds like standard Destiny fare, there's an all-new twist on the gameplay that Bungie had kept under lock and key. A twist that would further blur the lines and redefine the light and dark in this universe. We started wielding the darkness last year during Beyond Light, that was one thing, but it turns out that that coin can also be flipped on us, because now some of our enemies have begun to wield the light. Savathun's army includes Hive ghosts who can awaken Hive light bearers, each with their own classes and subclasses, using our very own abilities against us. This will not only change up the gameplay, but its implications onto the larger lore are immense. I mean, we thought the light was our power to have, that it chose us, that its benevolence meant that we were destined to have it. But now our greatest foe yet has managed to utilize its power, changing everything going forward. Promising the best campaign Bungie had created for Destiny yet, with an all-new weapon, some new advancements, on top of the new destination to carry us once the expansion launched in February of 2022. But of course, as exciting as these details around the Witch Queen were, they were only one piece of this larger showcase, as Bungie also took time to celebrate the fact that 2021 marked their 30th anniversary. The company was founded back in 1991 by Alex Seropian and Jason Jones. Jason Jones even made an appearance before the official reveal stream, talking about the company's history. This came with the announcement of a 30th anniversary pack and free event heading players' way in December, allowing them to get a hold on gear, both physical and in-game, that celebrated the entire history of not just Destiny, but Bungie as a whole. At the same time, they announced that with the launch of the next season building up to the Witch Queen that very day, cross-play was now live in Destiny 2. Meaning if you were on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC, you could now play with people on the other platforms at any time. No more sticking to your own console or machine family. It's time to break the fight open and encounter everyone from everywhere. But while the here and now is certainly exciting, Bungie also took some time to tease the far-flung future, because they revealed that this entire story that we've been following since at least the release of Shadowkeep, even tying all the way back to the launch of the original game back in 2014, has all been part of one massive journey. We've been embarking on the Light and Darkness saga, the clashes of these two elemental powers, which is all going to come to a head in 2024.
And now we're excited to announce the release after Lightfall, the final chapter in the Light and Darkness saga, Destiny 2, the final shape. It's going to be one wild, continuous ride.
Yes!
Of course, fan theories sprung out across the internet. What could it mean? What is the final shape? The surprising thing was, this wasn't the first time this term had ever been brought up. Back in the Books of Sorrow revealed during the Taken King in 2015, which uncovered deep vestiges of the history of Oryx, Savathun, and Xivu Arath, we also saw mentions of this so-called final shape. There, it was described as a fire without fuel, burning forever, killing death, asking a question that is its own answer, entirely itself. Now, this is just one interpretation of the fabled final shape, but boy, we must be in for something big in 2024. The finish line was now in sight. The 10-year journey we had been embarking on since the release of Destiny 1 now had an endpoint. All we have to do is put in the final pieces to get us there, which of course will kick off in a major way with the Witch Queen in February. But before that came out, there was just one more season to fill the gap. Because right as this live stream came to a close, Season of the Lost went live. And it kicked off with one of the biggest events the game had been building to for years. The return of Queen Mara Sov. After seemingly dying at the start of the Taken King in 2015, it was revealed in Forsaken's Endgame in 2018 that she actually survived and was journeying elsewhere in space. But now, in 2021, she was back in full force, once again becoming a major character as part of the ever-growing ensemble that Destiny 2 had created. But it's with her arrival that we reveal a shocking truth. A truth about Osiris. After trying to poison the minds of the people of the last city, and even unleashing a full Vex invasion, he launched to the top of the Vanguard's most wanted list. But he's always been a hero, hasn't he? He's always been on our side. Why would that change now? Well, Mara Sov is able to illuminate the situation for us, as it's revealed that Osiris has been taken over and possessed by Savathun. The Witch Queen herself took over Osiris's body after his ghost Sagira died, Just before the arrival of the Crow, Savathun took Osiris's place. Everything that's happened this year has been by her design. The armistice with Keitel, the friendship with the House of Light, the dawn of Crow's journey of redemption, it was all orchestrated in some way by Savathun. But what's interesting is that the outcome we've reached seems to be positive. These are all good developments that will no doubt help us when it comes to the battle against the imposing threat of the Black Fleet. But still, characters can't help but feel a little slighted that all of this was part of the machinations of the Witch Queen.
I am no villain, and you are no hero. We are paracausal.
At the very least, Marasov has successfully encased Savathun in this big ice crystal, keeping her contained. In order to find some kind of way to end Savathun's reign once and for all, we wind up striking a deal with her to keep her safe from the forces of her sister, Xivu Arath. These siblings, man, they keep mucking up the whole works. First, Oryx messes things up, Savathun manipulates us for a year, and now Xivu Arath's army is in town trying to destroy things? I feel like we're going to be dealing with these guys for a while. But hey, this does give us the best insight into Savathun, as there are several moments during the season's story where we're able to talk directly to her, revealing more of her ambitions and personality. We're not the only ones talking to Savathun, however, because the Crow is also adamant to speak with her, to learn her true intentions when it came to possessing Osiris, someone he thought he was close to. But as a result of his ambition and his investigation, Savathun winds up showing him his past. After an entire year where Crow's identity has been kept secret from both others and himself, this is the moment he finally learns. Savathun shows him that he was once Aldrin Sov, Prince of the Awoken, brother to the Queen, and murderer of Cade 6. Now, not only is it satisfying to finally see Crow unveil these secrets, but the way Savathun relishes in revealing it is actually so sick.
You hurt him.
Someone had to. Better for it to have come from a friend.
We're not even at her grand entrance in her expansion yet, and Savathun's already made a mark as one of the game's best villains, which is helped in a big way by her voice. Deborah Wilson voices Savathun here, and she really just revels in her position of cunning power. It's so awesome. Overall, there's lots of very cool stuff this season. The Savathun Osiris twist floored players who'd been following along. Crow learning his past was a big deal. All of this continued to highlight a major improvement in Destiny's storytelling in the last year or so. Starting with Season of Arrivals in 2020, players were becoming a lot more invested into the goings-on of the story, in following some of these characters along on these smaller chapters. Destiny may have started as a game that struggled to tell a story, that struggled to define a large majority of its cast, but those flaws were going away. It wasn't just Cade 6 as the one fan-favorite character anymore. People liked Eris Morn, Marasov, the Drifter, Crow, Savathun, whoever. There was a lot to enjoy on this front now. A lot more to experience for the story-focused players. Because of that, 2021 might be one of Destiny's best years to date. Despite not having a major expansion release, there was a lot to enjoy here. I mean, if it weren't for the content vault with the release of Beyond Light, this might even be remembered as Destiny 2's best year. I mean, hell, kinetic ammo was infinite now. Ever since Destiny 1, you had to keep an eye out for ammo for all 3 types of weapons you could carry. That remained true heading into Destiny 2. But Bungie noted that hunting for primary or kinetic ammo during the more difficult activities like the raid was no fun at all. So, to alleviate some pain points, kinetic ammo was made infinite. You no longer had to look out for the white ammo bricks on the ground. It's just the green and purple stuff now. So there was a lot to enjoy with the current state of Destiny 2. But at the same time, players noticed that the story of Season of the Lost very quickly began to peter out. Not necessarily because of the quality of the story, but more due to the outside circumstances surrounding it. Seasons are only built to feature roughly 8 weeks of story, with new updates coming every Tuesday. And then for the last couple weeks, players are able to catch up on some of this story material, which manages to fill the entire 3-month period that the season is active. But because the Witch Queen was delayed to February, this season is actually set to last for a grand total of 6 months. So after a lot of the story was wrapped up, Destiny once again entered one of its oft-maligned content droughts. It had been a minute since the game experienced one of these, so it hit especially hard for some players who had gotten used to the consistent pace of seasonal material to keep the game interesting. There was some stuff, however, to keep players interested, because on December 7th, Bungie launched their 30th anniversary event, which contained an all-new free activity called the Dares of Eternity, which was run by Starhorse. Xur, Agent of the Nine, would be the narrator/translator for Starhorse, sending players into an arena to face off against enemies and even some jumping puzzles to keep up the variety. But on the flip side, a lot of what was in this 30th anniversary pack was actually hidden behind a paywall. Yeah, if you didn't shell out $25 for the pack, you were left with less than half of what the update offered. Only by buying in were you able to experience this to its fullest. There were a legion of new items, many of which were directly themed off of Bungie's history. In terms of Destiny's history, the Gallarhorn was back for players to acquire. There's a new armor set inspired by the Marathon games Bungie made in the mid-90s. Then there are a few more weapons taking cues from Halo. You had the exotic sidearm, the Forerunner, which is named after the characters who created the Halo rings, but also takes on the appearance of the Magnum from Halo Combat Evolved. The BXR-55 Battler is a new legendary pulse rifle that's modeled directly off the battle rifle introduced in Halo 2. Then you had the legendary sword Half-Truth, which was based on the energy sword from Halo, and that was joined by the Other Half, which is the same sword, just purple, referencing the different looks the energy sword has had in those games over the years. And on top of that, by purchasing the 30th anniversary pack, you could also gain access to the new dungeon called Grasp of Avarice, which took players back to the Cosmodrome, to the famed loot cave from all the way back in Destiny 1, to encounter new challenges and even explore a story about the cost of greed. The Bungie 30th anniversary contained plenty of fun things for players to chase, for players to take part in, but it also raised a bit of a stink because it cost money. So much of this game is already charging you money, from the expansions to the season pass to the Eververse store. While these things are mostly optional, there are so many avenues for this game to make money, which feels directly in contrast to the Bungie of old. Not even that old, mind you. Go back to 2016 to Destiny 1's April update, which featured a comparable amount of material to the 30th anniversary pack, except it was totally free. Anyone who owned the Taken King could take part in what the April update had to offer. The monetization behind this game was starting to really raise eyebrows by this point. I mean, it wasn't hard to assume that things like the Eververse were being pushed so much because of the involvement of Activision. You know, they're one of the most notoriously greedy game publishers out there. But it's now been over 2 years since Bungie left Activision, and yet still, these practices are part of the game. They may even be a little more predatory. Were we chasing the wrong boogeyman? It's hard to fully dive into this game sometimes, and especially hard to recommend it to new players because you know that inevitably it's going to be a big money sink. It gets to a point where you gotta look over at Bungie and ask, don't you already have enough money? I guess this is just how capitalism works. At the very least, Destiny 2 Forsaken was made free to play. Finally, players who hadn't spent a dime now had a campaign to take on. The entire story of Cade's Fall was now available to all players. Now, the Endgame material within the Dreaming City was still locked behind what was called the Forsaken Pack, so that still cost money, but the main campaign was available to play. But that was going to be temporary, because once the Witch Queen launched in February, Forsaken was going to follow the 3 campaigns before it and head into the Destiny content vault. You can't sell something with the knowledge it's going to get deleted, I guess. So get in there now, head over to the Tangled Shore and relive that story while you can, because in a couple months, it'll be gone forever. It wasn't the only thing leaving either, because despite Bungie making some improvements on the seasonal front, all of that material was still temporary. While the Year 4 seasonal material was able to survive past the point each season would end, they'd only continue to exist until the end of the year. Once the Witch Queen launches, all 4 of this year's seasons are heading into the content vault right alongside Forsaken's campaign. FOMO was still very much a factor. Players now had a year to experience the seasonal story, series, but only that year. Despite 2021 being a marked improvement, you still had to be there to experience it. In a few short months, these great chapters with the Crow and the twist of Savathûn possessing Osiris are gonna be removed, and the only way for players to experience this stuff going forward is to find compilations on YouTube. In a way, we've returned to the Grimoire days of old, where you have to leave the game to experience the fullness of what it has to offer. If for nothing else, anticipation was beginning to ramp up for what was coming next, as players turned their sights towards the promotional efforts for the Witch Queen as they really began to hit a stride. It all kicked off with a brand new trailer at the Game Awards on December 9th. And while most of it is gameplay footage, it also contained live action footage for the first time in a Destiny trailer since the release of Vanilla Destiny 2. This time it features Ikora and Eris Morn getting a debrief from a Guardian about their first encounter with a knight, a light-bearer knight, a foe who could come back from death, activate super abilities, and wipe everyone else off the map. It really illustrates how terrifying it can be to be on the receiving end of powers like that, and it surely set up the Witch Queen expansion to play into that with this addition to the gameplay. But that was only the start. Promotion continued strong into the new year 2022. With each new trailer highlighting a new aspect of the coming campaign, like one revealing new looks at the new destination Savathûn's throne world, which is special because it is entirely controlled by Savathûn. We're on her turf this time, and it's gonna change things up.
It's not too late to turn around.
There was a new VDoc detailing Bungie's approach to the expansion, the new additions, the new campaign, the new weapons. Basically everything that was going to be added this time was given a bit of behind the scenes detail in this VDoc. Eventually everything was capped off by the launch trailer, giving one last flashy showcase of everything the expansion was set to offer, all set to the song Cruel World by Fantagram Music. But while excitement was building in anticipation of the Witch Queen's release, there was one major development for Bungie mere weeks before its launch. A development that was a big surprise for practically everyone. It was announced that Bungie was going to be acquired by Sony Interactive Entertainment for a whopping $3.7 billion. For a studio that always prided itself on its independence, the fact that they were getting acquired by their third bigger fish in their lifespan was quite startling. After all the hubbub around Bungie leaving Microsoft in 2007, later leaving Activision in 2019, they've put themselves into this scenario again with Sony. This only raised more eyebrows when it was eventually revealed years later that apparently Bungie's financial situation in the early 2020s was not up to snuff. And according to one source, the choice was to either be acquired by a bigger company or die. So alright, welcome our new Sony overlords. While they wouldn't finalize the deal until July, this did mean that Bungie was part of the PlayStation family. They had of course built up a bit of a relationship with PlayStation since the launch of Destiny 1, with a number of PlayStation exclusive items, maps, strikes, you name it. But while those had gone the way of the dodo, the two companies had still been working closely. Thankfully, this still meant that Destiny 2 was going to release on multiple platforms, so even though Sony had acquired Bungie, you could still play Destiny on Xbox and PC. Not to mention, given the insane amount of money Sony spent on Bungie, a large portion of that was allocated to keeping employees on board to prevent any mass layoffs. Job security is so sick. Even with all of this going on, the excitement for the Witch Queen was really what was capturing players' minds at this point, as even in-game the countdown started to draw to a close. Because finally, Season of the Lost came through with its final events to tee up the story that was on its way. Part of the crux of this season's story is that Savathûn wants to be free to roam the universe without being hunted by her sister Xivu Arath. And so Mara Sov struck a deal with her to separate her from her powers, which would prevent Xivu Arath from being able to track and follow her. But Mara reveals to us that once Savathûn is separated from her powers, we will be able to kill her, ending Savathûn's reign of terror on the universe. And now, after we've successfully held off Xivu Arath's forces, we perform the ritual to separate Savathûn from her icy prison, all as part of the trick to destroy her once and for all. But as it turns out, the trick is on us. Savathûn quickly manages to escape in a flash, leaving nothing behind except the unconscious body of Osiris.
Thank you.
Savathun is free once more. She's out there in the universe, and it's now time for everyone to gear up for whatever she plans to do next, which of course is right around the corner. After an entire year's worth of direct build-up across multiple seasons, Savathun was now a physical threat ready to impose her will on us once and for all. The Witch Queen had now arrived. And players could pick it up in a couple different ways. They could of course buy the standard expansion for $40, they could pick up the deluxe edition for $80 to get access to the entire year's worth of season passes and the upcoming dungeons. Or they could pick up the collector's edition for $150, which would get them some physical items, the crown jewel of course being a real-life hive ghost, which could pair really well with the ghost model sold with the original game back in 2014 if you ever picked that up. But now it has all led to this. The Witch Queen may not be the Grand Slam finale, as that will come with Lightfall and the final shape, but it was in many ways the culmination of everything we had done so far, and a major chapter in the story against the Hive. Gear up, Guardians. The clock has now turned to February 22nd, 2022. Pop over to your console or PC and boot up Destiny 2, because it's now time to take back the light. Almost immediately after starting this campaign, you'll notice that it is operating on an entirely new level that Destiny has not seen in a story mode before. We've had some good campaigns in the past. The Taken King is the obvious standout from Destiny 1, and Forsaken was the standout for Destiny 2. But the Witch Queen expansion takes those and says, sure, those were good, but what if we did something great? What if we opened with the reveal of Savathun's enormous ship above the surface of Mars, and in order to get on board you have to infiltrate a Cabal facility, kill some guys to access the systems, also you can take control of this enormous cannon they've aimed at the ship. But instead of loading around to blow the ship sky high, you instead jump into the barrel to make yourself the bullet. And what if, after all of that, the expansion turned around and said, oh, we're just getting started. Destiny 2 The Witch Queen is far and away the best expansion Bungie has made for this game yet. This is the single most well-rounded experience they've released, with a better story than they've ever told for this game, and more interesting level design than they've ever done before. I mean, The Witch Queen is Bungie's first home run with Destiny. This is a half-court shot where the ball makes a couple rings around the hoop before going in just to show off a little bit. This is Sidney Crosby scoring the golden goal in the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. Insert another sports metaphor here if you want. And it all starts in an area where Destiny has always thrived, the art direction, which is once again spectacular. Once you finally get on board Savathun's ship, the detail and architecture is incredible. It really does feel like exploring the Dreadnought back in the Taken King, but with its own very clear and distinct style that separates it from what we've seen before. Hive structures have always been dark, brown, and murky, but what if they were bright, filled with greens and reds all over the place? That's what this ship brings. And it also comes with the premier new destination for the campaign, Savathun's Throne World. A world connected to Savathun's own mind. At one side is an enormous citadel, featuring some more of that same great hive architecture. But even beyond the citadel, we can explore this rotting forest area, with tunnels and caves baked in throughout. It's one big area, but with two distinct sides, so you never really get bored with what you're seeing. Now, there are questions raised like, why would Savathun even allow us to enter her throne world? Seems like the god of cunning would be smarter than that. But everyone in the story is pretty sure it's part of some larger scheme. We just have to dig deeper to find out what it might be. The Throne World is not the only location we visit either. We also briefly return to Europa to enter the pyramid ship that still rests on the surface. There is a whole different design language going on here, continuing this big, black, monolithic architecture that we've seen from the pyramids before, but with way more detail. We've got these reflective glass floors that almost look like pools of water. We have extending platforms. One of them even knocked this Cabal guy into the abyss.
One of those voices spoke to you in the Black Garden as well.
Rest in peace, that guy. Hell, we see yet another one of those veiled statues. These things are everywhere. The next area the game excels at is, of course, the music. The team here have killed it once again on a bunch of new tracks, which highlight the darker Hive themes the game has done so well in the past, with some extra new flavors to help highlight the cunning of Savathun herself. But art direction and music are two areas Destiny has always excelled in. How does Witch Queen stand apart even beyond that? Well, for one thing, there's a huge step up in terms of level design. In practically every Destiny campaign before this, the levels consisted of going to different rooms and shooting everyone as best as you could. Eventually you'd get to a boss fight where you had to shoot one guy really good before you killed them. When you get down to the nitty-gritty of what you're doing, there's really not a ton there in terms of design. But as much as shooting is still integral to the gameplay, as it should be, there's a lot more going on here at the same time. This campaign starts to bring in mechanics and design ideas that are a bit more complex than what campaigns have been used to before. We might not be reaching the same insane intricacies of a raid encounter, but we're a cut above previous campaign missions. Though there is one mechanic lifted directly from the raids, which is the ability to rally to the flag. At certain points in practically every campaign level, you'll place down a flag that'll instantly charge up your abilities, super, and fill up your ammo. All before you likely head into a darkness zone where you can't respawn, or you're about to fight a big boss. It's the game's way of gearing you up before you jump into something that has a higher likelihood of killing you. But while the raid banners are consumable items that you have to stock up on when entering those activities, the campaign banners here are presented to you every time you're about to enter one of these encounters. They're infinite, given to you by the game. Then, once the encounters start, there's a solid likelihood that you'll have to do a bit more than just shoot at bad guys. In the third level of the campaign, you come across this Scorn boss, whose health you can whittle down 1/3 at a time. But after that, he'll go immune. So you have to go to these side rooms, kill a chieftain in each, then destroy this crystal that's controlling the big guy's shield. Only by destroying the active crystals will his shield go down and suddenly you can go wild again. So it's not just about standing in one place and shooting, you have to be on the lookout and paying attention for what you do next. But there's major updates in terms of traversal too. Since we're in Savathun's throne world, we encounter certain things when traveling that we might not anywhere else. There are incredibly dark corridors down in the depths below, and our ghost will not light up like a flashlight as he so often does. Instead, you gotta shoot these red growing sacs that reveal lights that help you continue along. The main new mechanic, however, is called Deep Sight. At several moments during the campaign, you'll come across this glowing spot of, well, it looks like light, but it's actually darkness. When communicating with it, you'll unlock the ability to see different platforms temporarily. This comes during moments where the path forward may not be clear, so it takes Deep Sight to see what otherwise cannot be seen. You can see platforms to jump on, corridors hidden behind rocks, even these tablets that you have to shoot to open up the next area. There's also the incredibly cool detail where some of the statues might suddenly point you in the direction you want to go. They might seem stationary, but with Deep Sight you can see them move, which is so sick. But don't worry, it's not like the Witch Queen is dropping the shooting altogether. In fact, it's all still here exactly as you know it with a couple major additions. For one thing, there's the all-new weapon type, the Glaive. This part melee, part ranged weapon with a built-in shield. You can use it as a mid-range weapon and take down enemies from a bit of a distance, or you can get up close and personal and skewer them with everything you've got. And when things get hectic, you can activate the shield, defending yourself from attacks, which takes away the melee but still leaves you with the ranged attack. While glaives might be a real weapon in the real world, the way Destiny plays with them makes them wholly unique to this universe. Nowhere else are you gonna get a glaive quite like this. But it's not a weapon you can simply find in an engram. In order to acquire it, you have to craft it. Destiny 2 has just added weapon crafting to the mix. You may have noticed Mars is back. It was one of the 4 planets that vanished when the Black Fleet started to arrive in our solar system. But now, the planet has re-emerged and it's come with a new area called the Enclave, which serves as a small-scale social space where you talk to the main campaign vendor, Ikora Rey. But it rests atop a pyramid structure. No one knew it was there. Maybe it appeared in the time Mars was gone, but inside you have the ability to commune with this artifact and craft new weapons. If you've acquired the weapon frame, you can head in and craft a weapon with your own choice of attributes and strengths that can match your playstyle. It's a totally new way to engage with the weapons here, and throws a rather significant mechanic at players for them to play around with and explore. It brought a major change to the sandbox, and completely altered the meta going forward, because now players were chasing for weapons that had red borders around them. That meant you could acquire that weapon's frame and use it to craft something with the attributes you wanted. And the more you played with said weapon equipped, the more it would level up and the better attributes you could get over time. Now, crafting has been a divisive addition to the game, as some people vastly prefer the more randomized loot drops that the game had been famous for before. But others were totally on board with being able to create the perfect weapon that fit their playstyle to a T. And with this new ability, you can get geared up as best you can to face off the new enemies this expansion has to offer. Now, there aren't necessarily new enemy types this time. We're still mostly fighting the Hive, the Scorn, the Cabal for a little bit, who consist of the same guys we've been fighting for a while. But as promised by the trailers leading up to this expansion's release, Savathun's army of Hive, known as the Lucent Brood, have gained the powers of the light.
Did you see that moth just now? It was glowing with light. Not corrupted light, Guardian, but light like ours.
It all starts with the appearance of various Hive soldiers with accompanying moths of light. These are pretty simple. They attach to a Hive soldier and give them an overshield. Once you kill the soldier, they'll fly around either attaching themselves to another soldier or approaching you to explode and kill you. To stop either of those things from happening, you gotta shoot them out of the sky. You can even play it a bit strategically and shoot them while they're near enemies, because then they'll do damage to them instead. But that's only the start, because almost immediately you will come across actual Lightbearer Hive. These are Hive that have been given the powers of the light by Hive ghosts. They have class abilities, they even have supers. You have the Lightbearer Knights who have void abilities. They'll create these 2 massive shields that they can throw at you and do incredible amounts of damage. And if they don't want to do that, they'll just slam them together and throw you into the abyss. The Lightbearer Wizards use arc energy. They cast a super of lightning, striking down the area and attacking you almost wherever you might be. And finally, the Lightbearer Acolytes have solar abilities, able to cast a super that throws flaming knives at you. To which I say, 2 can play at that game. But of course, these are Guardians, which means they have ghosts. They have the power to come back after you've killed them. So you gotta be on the ball once you take a Lightbearer Hive down, because their ghost will bring them back. The only way to stop that from happening is quite literally running up to the ghost, grabbing it in your hands, and crushing it right then and there, which is quite a guttural thing to do.
That thing is not like me. You see that, right? I can't believe this.
Man, even the first time you do it, you gotta look at your hand as if you say, what did I just do? But after a while, it just becomes part of the process. You've done it a few dozen times, and you start to move on like nothing. Nothing like getting desensitized to violence in a Destiny game, let me tell you. But it's not like the Hive ghosts are bad either. They're just serving light bearers who are attacking us. There is one Hive ghost that we meet in the story who actually helps us out. His name is Finch, a ghost who decided one day to just not revive his light bearer knight. Instead, he's helping us uncover the mysteries of Savathûn and her throne world, becoming this location's main vendor.
All you need to know, us wandering ghosts gave into the Hive believing we'd found purpose, and well, peer pressure's a hell of a thing, huh?
But all of this, of course, begs the question, how did the Hive get the powers of the light? I mean, Gaul back in vanilla Destiny 2 was trying to steal the Traveler's light. That was his whole deal back then, but he never quite managed to figure it out. Now Savathûn's just casually mastered it? That's the big question hanging over the story. How on earth did Savathûn manage to pull that off? Of course, the leading theory throughout the story is that her time possessing Osiris gave her all the information she needed. She had access to Vanguard files, to the data kept within the tower. She had direct access to Ikora Rey, who believed she was talking to Osiris, a close friend. Of course, this theory tears up Ikora quite a bit, giving a lot of strength to her character in this story. She should have been able to see something was wrong with Osiris, but couldn't put the pieces together in time, and maybe she just handed Savathûn the answers she was after. But that's just a theory, a game theory. In order to find the truth of the situation, we have to uncover many of Savathûn's memories. The main crux of the story is that we're hunting down artifacts from Savathûn's past, each with an attributed memory, to learn more about her in order to see what's going on in her mind, understand how she got here, and find out what she might be after. Which, in a surprising turn, doesn't just shed light onto Savathûn herself, but a being that stands above Savathûn. Someone far more powerful than she is. Someone she actually fears. We'd been getting hints towards a being like this during Season of the Lost just before this expansion came out, but now we get a lot more. As we uncover the first of Savathûn's memories during this campaign, we're left with one hell of a bombshell.
I stand before a being with 1,000 names. It whispers one. The witness.
Oh boy. This expansion might be all about Savathûn and her machinations, but don't let that stop these writers from opening the doorway into the greatest threat we'll ever face. But it takes putting together the last pieces of Savathûn's memories to find the truth we're actually searching for. The fourth relic we find is actually from Savathûn's last known moments before she acquired the powers of the light. Fantastic, that seems like the exact memory we're looking for. But as we discover what this memory entails, we also discover that for the very first time in a Destiny campaign, Bungie pulls off a genuine narrative twist. As it turns out, the ritual we performed to separate Savathûn from her powers at the end of Season of the Lost was actually quite successful. This left Savathûn injured, wounded, and dying, and in those moments she turned to the Traveler for help. During this spectacularly rendered cutscene, we watch as Savathûn tries to plead with the Traveler, an entity she has chased down for billions of years, all because she's reached her last possible resort.
Oh, wouldn't it be clever of you if after everything, you simply let me die?
And then, after all of that, she just dies. That's it. That's the end of Savathûn's story. She simply just dies. Until, after a few moments, a Hive ghost appears to bring her back as a light bearer. Now, if you know anything about the Guardians, you know they wake up with no memory of their past. The Savathûn that took over Osiris died before this story began, and the one we've been chasing has been the Lightbearer incarnation of her. But the real trick is that while we thought we were getting information for ourselves to uncover Savathûn's secrets, we were actually giving her back her memories.
The light offers us a fresh start, but if we don't know where we came from, how will we know where to go?
This entire campaign has actually been constructed by this new Savathun so that she can remember who she was before. That's why it felt so easy to enter her throne world. She wanted us to be there. And now her plan is to be set in motion. Her plan to transport the Traveler to her throne world to keep it safe from the threats that are out there, but only for her lucent brood. Which sends us into the final mission with a ton of purpose, because now it's our job to stop Savathun from transporting the Traveler and take her down once and for all. This is awesome. It's on the same level as the Flood twist from Halo CE or the Arbiter twist in Halo 2. They actually pulled off a genuine twist that changes the entire shape of the story and even recontextualizes everything we've seen so far. It even changes how we think about the Traveler. It just helped Savathun without question. It didn't need to be coerced into creating Lightbearer Hive, it just did it. Is the Traveler this all-seeing benevolent force of good that we've thought it was? Maybe not. Maybe it's not that simple. In any event, it's now up to us to, well, finish the fight. With the help of one last memory that even the original Savathun did not know. Because while we teased the being known cryptically as the Witness, it's not just for the far-flung future. It's also been directly built into this story. The Witness is revealed to be the architect behind the Hive's turn to darkness. Billions of years ago, Savathun and her siblings were led into a place called the Deep, where they were discovered by the ancient worm gods and became the all-powerful beings we now know. All of this was because Savathun heard a doom prophecy, a promise of death and destruction from above, which forced them to go downwards. But as we learn, this prophecy was actually constructed by the Witness. It wanted Savathun and her siblings to travel into the Deep, because otherwise they might have instead been claimed by the Traveler and its light. The Witness's efforts created the Hive we know today, built entirely on a lie. Now, not only is this a cool revelation that we're able to use to shake Savathun to her core during the final boss fight, but it's also the first time we're hearing the Witness speak. And its voice comes from Brett Dalton, who of course played Grant Ward in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And he's doing great in the brief moments he has here. He's calm, he's calculating, and quite menacing in this role. It's pretty cool.
Lead your sisters down. Your coming will spare their short lives. And you will be reborn. The Witch Queen. Savathun.
All of which leads to the major boss fight to close out this campaign as we face down Savathun one-on-one. And with the additional mechanics and a fantastic looking set piece, this becomes one of, if not the single most memorable boss fight in Destiny history, at least in terms of campaigns. You gotta go around to kill these thread-bearing wizards and gain a bit of an extra power boost. Only then can you jump into the fray with Savathun and deal significantly more damage. It is an absolute blast to take on from start to finish, and one of the most challenging boss encounters Bungie's ever implemented into a campaign. And finally, after enough rounds, you whittle down Savathun's health more and more until you take her down. Boom! Well done, Guardian. The Traveler is freed and Savathun is defeated. But she's a Guardian now, isn't she? Can't her ghost just revive her? Well, it can, unless of course it decides to vanish instead. For what purpose? We don't know yet, but it leaves Savathun herself off the board for the time being. Her plan is thwarted, the Traveler is saved, and the threat of the Witch Queen has been laid to rest. Of course, the Lucent Brood is still around in the throne world for people to go take on, but other than that, the primary story of this expansion comes to a close with the successful and thrilling defeat of Savathun. This campaign is awesome, dude. I mean, Destiny's been on a wild road of ups and downs, and it's never been stable in practically anything it's done, but this is where it all comes together. Bungie finally nailed it, and reception was through the roof. It was almost a shock how good this wound up being. I mean, after so many years of hoping for the next one to be good, it almost gets to a point where you think it might never happen. But now, it has. And word of mouth of course took its course. I can vividly remember messages breaking beyond the Destiny community to say that the Witch Queen really nailed it. They were basically saying if you had slept on Destiny before, or if you'd been gone for a while, this was the perfect time to jump in because this expansion offered everything players have really wanted since this whole thing started back in 2014. And Savathun herself has not only become the greatest villain we faced so far, but one of the best characters in this universe, with a cunning attitude that manages to keep up right to the bitter end.
But the witness is coming. The game is yours to play now. Yours to win or lose. Just don't say I didn't warn you.
But of course, now that players have completed the campaign, they will head into the endgame, with all new stuff to tackle as they continue to explore Savathun's throne world, all on a path to rise to the new power cap, which has jumped up to 1550. The floor behind it even raised to 1350, starting everyone out on the same playing field once more. Of course, there are new patrols to tackle in the new destination, on top of new public events to take part in. There are 3 new lost sectors for players to explore as well. There's a new 6-player activity called the Wellspring. There are 2 new strikes for players to take on. One, of course, was once again built into the campaign. On top of that, over the course of the next year, players were also able to experiment with upgrades to their subclasses. When Beyond Light came out and introduced Stasis, it came with an entirely new way to play around with and upgrade your subclass, adding a huge layer to build crafting that had been absent from Destiny 2 so far. Now, those same features, aspects, fragments, you name it, were slowly being added to the 3 light subclasses that players already had, starting with Void upon the Witch Queen's release, and eventually Solar and Arc as the year continued, which introduced a number of upgrades and advancements as well as a couple new abilities. My personal favorite one, of course, comes with the Warlock, because they get an all-new melee ability here called the Solar Snap. Hit the melee button and your character snaps their fingers, sending a barrage of fire towards enemies. It's awesome. But on top of all of this, there's also a new twist on the formula. Bungie is now allowing players to tackle the campaign in 2 different ways. You can of course tackle the campaign on normal mode with standard difficulty settings, or you can tackle it on legendary. Players are presented with this choice right up front. You can either be brave or become legend. But even after beating the campaign, you can go back in and tackle it on the other difficulty. This is something players had been asking for a long time, an increased challenge in the campaign. It's something Bungie did super well back during the Halo days, and now they've brought it to Destiny 2, allowing the most hardcore players to take on the hardest campaign challenge yet. Enemies are stronger, their energy shields are much tougher, so you have to prioritize your build a little bit to be able to cut through easier. On top of that, your tracker is disabled, so you have no idea if there are enemies close to you unless you can see or hear them. Coupling all of that with the new mechanics and level design, the legendary campaign for the Witch Queen was one for the books. Players were eating this stuff up. But while PvE was thriving, PvP was still being left in the dust, with the second expansion in a row with no new Crucible maps whatsoever. Clearly this is not a priority behind the scenes. Not to mention Gambit, which has been completely abandoned, my god. If there are any Gambit fans out there, I'm sorry, Bungie has really left you out to dry. At the very least, everything leads to the all-new raid, Vow of the Disciple. Players knew that Savathun herself would not be the raid boss this time, instead keeping her story contained within the campaign. So who exactly were players going to go up against during this raid? Well, they were sent inside of a pyramid ship which had been sitting off in the distance of Savathun's throne world, and they were put up against a terrifying being known as Rulk, an entirely new creature based on nothing we'd ever seen in Destiny before. A properly threatening character who is in fact the first disciple of the Witness. He was the first one to ever follow in the Witness's footsteps and do its bidding. And he is awesome. He is totally calm and collected, he has a sick as hell design, and some incredible lore to dig into. Not to mention, his voice sounds incredible.
Not kings. Not gods, disciples, prophets, saviors serving existence, an undying purpose, a privilege.
And once players finally faced him down at the end of the raid, they discovered that he was way more active as a boss compared to many others from the past. Many of Destiny's raid bosses, at least when it came to damage phases, would really just sit there and let you shoot them. But Rhulk was mobile. He was moving around this arena, ready to kick you into oblivion if he got too close. So not only do you have to be shooting him as best as you can, but you gotta be on the move to make sure he doesn't kill you too, which created a whole new challenge. And the other fantastic detail to this whole fight is that Rhulk could easily wipe the floor with everybody here, but he doesn't really believe that you have the power to take him down, so he's essentially just playing with his food. But it gets to a point where the tide begins to turn, and he starts to realize these 6 little pests, these 6 little guardians, might actually be able to kill him. Vow of the Disciple became yet another highlight among the hardcore player base, though the Day 1 race was not without its kinks. There were a number of server errors and game-breaking bugs, with players being soft-locked during encounters, which wasn't fantastic. But once all was said and done, Team Elysium managed to be the first team to defeat Rhulk and beat the raid, taking 7 hours and 14 minutes to do so. This marked their second world's first win in a row, as they previously took the crown for the Vault of Glass reprise just last year. All of this combined made the Witch Queen an incredible expansion for Destiny 2. It might not have added as much as something like Forsaken did back in 2018, but what it did add was some of the best stuff the game had ever seen. So there was a renewed sense of optimism, a renewed sense of excitement, not just for the story and material we had just gotten, but for what this could mean for the next 2 expansions. If this is how good the Witch Queen is, imagine how good Lightfall and the Final Shape will be. Perhaps after years of rocky development, Bungie had actually found their stride. The next 2 expansions, Lightfall and the Final Shape, were on their way and they promised to be big, as we are set to face off against the being that caused the first collapse all those centuries ago. We are bound to face off against the Witness. But the Witness was not just revealed with a name drop and a couple voice lines. Players were able to get something far more concrete with this character. Immediately after completing the main story, players got one last additional scene. A scene set within a pyramid ship, revealing a being cloaked in darkness. A being with smoke pluming from their head. Smoke that appears to be made up of millions of identical faces. After all of the teasing throughout the campaign, throughout the years of build-up during this entire saga so far, we have now finally met our main villain.
Do not be afraid. Your pale heart holds the key.